Blood God, we're live. Hi everyone. It's
Wow.
been a while since we used this Twitch channel, huh? Dust this whole thing off.
Holy cow.
Get the cobwebs off.
Amazing. I love the just the very quick and dirty DIY right beneath. It's like, well, whatever.
Look, we don't
Eric,
need
we
to
could
make
have
we don't need to
we
make
should have
this
asked her.
complicated. We should look, in retrospect, in hindsight, could we have asked? Yes, we could have. However, we did this last night, so it doesn't matter. It's all good.
Yeah, this came together relatively quickly as Blood God stuff tends to do.
Folks in the chat, you let me know how the audio's sounding because you are the
Yeah.
sounding board for this. So everybody's sounding good. We've got Kat, we've got Nadia, we've got Felipe, who's our special guest for this episode.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello, hello. Good to have you here again.
Felipe,
Thank you.
tell the chat about yourself.
Oh my god, that's so embarrassing. So, I am Felipe. I am the editor, the creator of the cRPG book project, which is like this huge book on the history of role-playing games, focus especially on computer role-playing games. So it's a bit of a different profile than we usually have here, but I guess that's the point. We have this little clash of worlds.
Indeed. This week's episode is. Oh, we haven't started recording yet, by the way.
No.
For reals, this is just the pre-show. But yeah, this week we're going to be talking about what is an RPG. And Felipe, you did an amazing thread about that on Twitter. Tell us about that.
It just was like in response to the whole thing that, the producer of Yoshida, right? That he
Yeah.
was doing all the comments on Final Fantasy 16, like how he doesn't like the jRPG term and all that thing that it was indeed used very negatively in the past, like in the 2000s.
Yeah.
So the whole point of my thread was to show that not only Japanese RPGs were influenced a lot by Western RPGs, but the opposite also happens. And it was like both of them had a lot of crisis, and in actually, like, Western RPGs had much more crisis than Japanese RPGs over time, and a lot more influence as well, like this back and forth. One of the things that I actually should have put on that thread that I love mentioning to people is that Planescape Torment, which is like, let's say, the great god of Western RPGs for people who love the classical computer RPGs. Not only they mention Final Fantasy 7 and 8 on the credits, they thank those
Oh.
games and inspiration,
Neat.
but if you actually play those games, you know that they have summons just like Final Fantasy. They copied the whole idea because they really like it. So if you cast like a high level spell, like let's say Celestial Cohort, a bunch of angels appear in a summon animation that is just like Knights of the Round from Final Fantasy 7.
Beauty.
Like it's really like you can see the developers playing that game, loving it, and then putting it on one of the most classic computer RPGs of all time. And I really love that kind of like cross influence that you have across all those games.
Okay. Well, it almost feels like we've already gotten started. So maybe
Yeah,
we
it
should
feels
just,
like we should just
Yes,
do
so-
the podcast
maybe we
now.
should just fire up the pod and
Talk.
like start recording and everything. Does my my chat sound okay?
One person said just turn it up a tiny bit.
Yeah, if you want to,
Yeah,
if you want
I
to bump
was-
that game by a little skosh, that'd be you'll be
Scooch.
fine. Yeah,
Skosh.
How's
a
that?
skosh.
Does
Yeah,
that sound
a
okay?
smidgen.
Yeah.
Am I going down or going up?
We're gonna test this one time too. Chat, let me know if you can hear this.
One of the things that we do every single week. Also, we have a lot of first-time listeners.
Yeah.
Welcome. Great to see you. One of the things that we do every single Saturday is we do a stream in our Discord for our Stars of Destiny. And they're on our Patreon. And we have a great time. It's a party every single episode. It gets very silly. At times we have a pre-show and a post-show. Yeah. So this is maybe a little bit of a taste of that for everybody. Yeah, but that's episode Blood God episode 400. So
We're
why don't
out
we
to
open it
poison
up
you
a little
all.
bit?
It's an official taste of it, and not like the times when we've accidentally uploaded the the live show and stuff to the free feed.
I've done that a few times.
Those are the surprise tastes. This is the official taste.
Toronto in the
Nadia,
house.
bring the pits.
Oh, I have one today. I actually, this is a
Ooh,
off the
she's
cuff
got
one.
one. She's got a pit.
Well, I'm not telling it now. I'm not blowing it now. But the way you said my name brought back a really powerful memory. If you want to look at the notes, don't tell anyone what it's going to be. But if you want to look at the notes, it's pretty good.
Excellent. I'm looking forward to it. Also, and I posted this in the chat, we have a shop now with t-shirts and mugs and mouse pads. And I'm going to be actually in one hot second introducing a promo code BloodGodPod 400, so you can get 10% off the shirt or hoodie of your choice. So yeah, in celebration of Axe of the Blood God episode 400, I meant to do that
like
right before
Blood
I got
God
on
Pod
here, but
420.
Sorry?
Blood God Pod 420. That's a better one.
Oh, don't ask what we're doing for the 420 episode. That's going to be
I was going to
something
say,
different.
Eric, do you have a plan stewing in your head there?
Oh, I've got ideas.
See, I mean, weed is legal in Canada, and I can smoke a lot of it and and play a video game.
Well, I'm booking my tickets to Canada.
Yeah, just like I booked that tickets to the Killers when I was high.
oh, you did?
So funny.
That was the best. Oh my god. Y'all, I need you to cover the podcast this week. I forgot about tickets to the Killers. Oh.
I'm actually seeing Savage Garden next month.
seeing-
Savage
Are you going to be
Garden.
taken to the moon and back?
To the moon.
I
and back. I
wanna
want to
stand
see
with
so many
you
JoJo
on the
cosplayers
mountain.
there. If they're not there, I'm going to be very disappointed in everybody in the world. Because I just love the fact they brought back Savage Garden for another generation. Maybe one song, but that's good enough for me. Savage Garden rules.
All right, everyone, we ready to
In
roll?
response to Spooky Man's question, yes, there should be shipping to Europe. It'll just be a little more expensive
Europe
A little.
shipping.
Is it
Just
to
a
be-
little.
because it's an American-based site.
God, I think about how Canada gets it with shipping. I just think Europe, Australia, man.
Okay, before we
Damn,
get
Phil.
underway, I need chat and y'all to settle something for me. Do
Okay.
all three of you know who Bonnie Raitt is?
I've
Bonnie
heard the
Ray.
name.
I know the song Bonnie Bray.
Bonnie Raitt.
No idea.
Raitt.
No.
This is terrible. I hate this.
Bonnie Bray.
How do we not all know who Bonnie Raitt is? Bonnie Raitt is so good. I can't
freaking nerds,
make
dude.
you love me. Like, it's so good. Oh my god, I hate this.
Why do you ask?
Because I was in a Discord call with some friends the other night, and we were watching this video that was like the top songs of every month for the last like 3 decades, and Bonnie Raitt was in the list. I was like, oh, I love Bonnie Raitt. And they were like, who's Bonnie Raitt? And I was like, no.
Some
I mean, who
Mandela
is she?
effect stuff going on.
Is she a singer?
Yes, she's a singer. Just in the nick of time. I can't make you love me. Oh my god, I
I'm sure
hate
I've heard
this.
these songs.
I
You're
hate
talking to a
this.
bunch of nerds, dude.
Is
I
this
mean, I
an wait?
listen to-
Is this
I
an
listen to
Austin thing?
music.
Is this a Texas thing? This might be a Texas
Almost
thing.
certainly.
It could be a Texas thing. I have
It's
a
a
lot of
Texas
Canadian.
thing.
Y'all know who
friends.
Stevie Ray Vaughan is, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I've heard
Okay, great. So Stevie Ray Vaughan is the one that transcends Austin. Bonnie Raitt is not.
Canada
Look, I
gave
grew
you all
up listening
Celine
to
Dion. Hope
Prince
you're
and the
thankful.
Replacements like a good Minnesotan, don't you know?
I grew up listening to Prince too. Okay,
Of course he did.
start. the
Lance Hart says, "I
podcast.
think she's the
hate this.
equivalent to Shania Twain." And like, yeah. Da, 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 da.
Wow, we got such a good crowd today. Holy cow. I'm
I
excited.
see a lot of familiar faces in here.
A lot of familiar faces, a lot of new people. First timers, Abby of the Moon, Star of Destiny. No, this isn't a Texas thing.
I hate
Okay.
this.
Hey, a lot of people in the chat. Everybody in the chat is agreeing with you, Eric.
Good, because I'm right.
Indeed.
Let it be
I
known.
do-
Ready
I-
to get the show on the road?
Let it be known.
I just
want to
say I do like music, but I don't know the titles of anything anymore. I don't know who sings anything anymore. I just listen to a song. Oh, I heard that on TikTok.
The
I
damage
like
is
it.
done,
I'll download
Nadia.
it.
The damage is done.
It's true.
We're gonna have Canadian music trivia someday.
I just want to say I do like music.
We're doing karaoke at PAX, by the way.
That is true. That is true. Anyone else takes Mr. Brightside, I'll skin you alive.
Salibur 7, yes. I do think we will do discussion of 3DS titles before the eShop closes.
For sure.
That
Very
is a
important.
plan.
Oh, before the 3DS eShop closes? Well, we have
do that
one
on our
more
live
episode.
show.
Oh yeah, if we want to
We
talk
could
about
do
that
that
on
in
the
our
live show.
in-person episode that we're recording at PAX East.
I'll bring my 3DS.
Oh, I'll get street passes again, probably for the last time.
Wow.
Oh, it makes me sad. My heart's just broke.
Yeah, we should definitely do that at the PAX East episode. By the way, maybe I'll mention this on the podcast. We will be at PAX East. It's going to be Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Pacific, and we're doing a meetup afterward where you can come
East
meet.
Coast
East
time.
Coast.
4:30
East
p.m.
Coast
East
time.
Coast time. You will be 3
sorry.
hours
I got
late.
so confused for a second there. Holy shit. I'm
4:30 East Coast.
brain
I'm not
broke.
used to this strange foreign time zones. East Coast time. We will be there. You can come meet us after the panel. The panel is we're doing a fantasy draft to create the best RPG. It'll be fun, and then you can all agree. We're going to be picking like the hero, the villain, the world, the soundtrack, mini game.
Yeah, the mini game. What mini game do you draft?
Gotta have the mini game. Obviously, I'm drafting Blitzball.
Oh, Gwent
Wanna
is
play
mine
Blitzball?
already. I'm gonna first round pick Witcher 3 just to put
It's like
Gwent in my game.
Is picking triple triad in the first round like picking a kicker in the first round?
Yes, it is.
This
It
is
is
like
exactly
everyone's
like
gonna name
picking a
something else,
kicker
and
in the first round.
Triple Trial will be left out. I was going to name Blades from Trails of Cold Steel, maybe.
All right.
I'm going to name Triple Triad too. I'm sorry.
Look,
Oh,
Triple
it's great.
Triad's
I mean,
good.
Triple Triad is like primo. When I was sick with SARS, I actually just played Triple Triad in Final Fantasy 14 for like 5 days.
Okay.
Not SARS, COVID. Jesus, what's wrong with me?
I've said this like 10 times. Are we starting now?
Yeah,
I guess we
yeah.
should.
Would you like to start? I can do the start music now.
Let's go. Welcome to another episode of Axe of the Blood God. Axe of the Blood God 400. I'm your host, Kat Bailey. Joining me as always, my lovely co-host since 2016, Nadia Oxford.
Hello, Kat. It is just like really humbling and intimidating to be sitting here with episode 400. That's as many as 4 100s, and that's not terrible at all.
And joining me is my equally lovely co-host since 2022, Eric Van Allen.
Hello, hi. I get to be the producer today. This is real fun.
Wow.
Good job. Nothing's smoking yet.
Not
And
yet.
who is
give
our
it time.
special guest?
Hello, I'm Felipe. I'm the editor of the cRPG book project, and I just want to thank for the invite and congratulate you on the 400 episodes.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Wow. Yes, we invited Felipe on because, yes, we are celebrating episode 400. And for this episode, this milestone episode, we're recording live on twitch.tv/bloodgodpod for everybody, not just the Stars of Destiny this week. And we've got a great crowd.
Yeah.
Very delighted to see so many fresh faces. This is a blast. You get a little taste of the chaos that we have every Saturday morning. But we invited Felipe on because we are going to return to the beginning and we are going to explore what is an RPG. It's a fraught conversation, and few people are better positioned to answer this question or help us answer this question than Felipe, because he edited the cRPG book, which if you have not checked it out, it's an incredible work, very comprehensive. There's also the jRPG book, equally awesome, wonderful stuff. So and beautifully put together, a lot of games that you can just go in and learn a ton about, very deep. So go and check that out. If you enjoy the podcast, please go ahead and review us on the podcatcher of your choice. It brightens our day. and also helps raise the profile of the podcast. You can find me on Twitter at @the_catbot. Nadia is at Nadia Oxford. Eric is at cmusi. And Felipe, where can we find you on Twitter?
I'm not sure you want to find me on Twitter, but it's at Felipe Pepe, which is my name, my full name.
Excellent.
So just
and
Felipe Pepe.
one of the reasons
That's
that we
cute.
had you on the show was that you did this really phenomenal thread, but that really encompassed the history of RPGs in general, like, and it showed like so much knowledge and so much scholarship. I was like, I should have him on for episode 400, and here you are. You're graciously agreed to be on here at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. because you're in Japan.
Yeah,
Oh my
I'm in
goodness,
Tokyo.
I'm sorry about that. Thank you for staying up.
No, don't worry. I was playing games with my friends until now. This is because of the time zone in Brazil. This is the time where I play with my friends usually. So
Oh,
I would be
interesting.
up anyway.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Yeah, we've all kind of twisted our internal clocks to meet our employment needs. That's for sure. Like you've seen me online at like 3 a.m, Kat. So you know what I'm all about.
Indeed. I woke up. I get up at 6 a.m. on Saturdays so I can be on the show. Also, it's because I watch soccer, but I'm going to martyr myself a little bit and say that that's why I'm here. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/bloodgodpod if you enjoy the show and if you want to access a lot of bonus content. We are in the middle of the Winter of Wick. We did a Pantheon of the Blood God exploration of Lunar, the Silver Star story, which was a very popular episode, and I really enjoyed putting that one together. Anytime you get Nadia and Anthony Agnello into the same room.
Yeah, we definitely kind of operate on the same wavelength of chaos, and it was just imagine us and Bob Mackey running a blog in the like 2008, I think it was, around that time, and just it was complete nonsense. It was amazing.
There's an actual moment you can find where that pod goes off the rails, and it's when, hey, did y'all know that Shadow Madness is on Steam? We just never recovered.
Truly. Yeah, Shadow Madness, our first Pandemonium episode, I expect.
Yeah, it's gonna be
Along
a contender.
With Monster Seed.
Monster Seed.
Felipe, have you played Monster Seed?
No, I'm not familiar.
This one, even
Neither are we.
The greatest scholars among us, this one eludes. Amazing. And finally, hey, it's episode 400, and guess what? We have a shop. Yes, we have actual merch. We have t-shirts, we've got mugs, we've got mouse pads. We're in the process of working on the year 2 pin. Finally, it's going to happen. We got a hoodie. It's great. Go check out Axe of the Blood God shop, and there's dashes in all of them, .fourthwall.com. That's Axe of the Blood God shop.fourthwall.com. And after this episode's over, I'm going to put a little promo code. That would be BloodGod400 for 10% off on the shirt or hoodie of your choice. Okay, it's time now to talk about what we have been playing, our, shall we say, sacrifice to the Blood God. And Felipe, you're our special guest. What have you been playing?
So, like I mentioned, I was playing with my friends until like half an hour ago, and we were playing For the King, which is a really fun, like I would say it's actually like a multiplayer RPG, because it's the kind of RPGs that I tried play single player like 1 year ago, and I completely bounced off. It didn't work for me. Then the moment I got my 2 friends to play with me, it's like, oh, this is amazing. And for me, it's really interesting because it's the kind of game that we're starting to see more of it. It was the same experience I had with Divinity Original Sin. They give this idea, oh, you can control a lot of characters, but really they want everyone to have, each player have a character, and it gets so much richer, and it has so many systems for that to be enjoyable. So it's really, I like this new trend of multiplayer RPGs.
So,
Eric, you were making noises. I'm not that familiar with For the King, but you were making noises of acknowledgement.
yeah, it's one that I've seen a few times before, and I've never really understood the pitch on, so I was kind of interested to hear about this. And so it does play kind of like a I mean, there were other games that tried to do the Sword Coast and stuff like that, where you would play multiplayer. The idea was to get a bunch of friends together, journey together, and all that. And I'm kind of interested to hear that because I do feel that, as we're probably going to talk about later in this episode, there are D&D roots at the the base of the RPG tree,
Maybe a few.
and I feel like that doesn't always get captured in the modern day, or at least that sense of camaraderie, that sense of multiplayer and people kind of bouncing things off each other. So For the King kind of goes for that. It goes for the multiplayer aspect.
Yeah, but in a different way, because like, let's say I used to play Baldur's Gate 1 with my brother in multiplayer, like, but it was a really bad system of multiplayer. For the King, I think like it is an RPG, but its influence on the way multiplayer work is much more like tabletop gaming. So it's like everyone has a token and you're exploring this map together. And let's say you can join to explore a dungeon or to get involved in a fight, but you can also like each one be on one side of the map.
Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
it's really interesting because you don't move as a party. You have this big board, and everyone on their turn they roll a die, and that controls how much they can walk. And if you're together, you fight together. If you're separate, let's say I can go kill a monster while you go to claim a shrine, and the other person goes back to town to buy an item. But it's a really fun experience because it's a kind of like light RPG, but very cute and also really challenging and strategic. Like each person controls only one character, but it has a lot of options and synergy between the players. It's really like I mentioned, I tried playing before. If you try to go for single player, you have to control 3 characters at once, and they are very bland, and it takes very long each turn. But when you're with friends, you have that downtime that one player is playing while the other two are talking. Is a very fun and I think really enjoyable, basically more tabletop than RPG, but is in RPG form, let's say.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it reminds me almost a little bit of Wildermyth back when that came out, and that's one that I've been wanting to go back to, and especially try and get some folks into playing multiplayer with me on. So I like I like hearing that. Like you were saying, that multiplayer RPGs aren't the most popular, but they do like fill a
Can I
need, I
introduce
think.
you to a little game called World of Warcraft, Eric?
Okay, that's massively multiplayer. That's
That,
different.
yeah.
Oh, I'm
Let me
sorry.
tell
I'm
you about the
sorry.
critically
I didn't
acclaimed
realize there was a
MMO.
difference.
Yeah.
And it's actually funny you say this because the friends I'm playing now are the same friends that I used to play World of Warcraft like 10 years ago.
Aw, that's cute. I like that.
Yeah, we had a little guild. It's like,
Wow. You make an interesting point, though. One of the things that I've really enjoyed is mixing classical RPG design, both PC RPGs and more console RPG oriented, with multiplayer mechanics. One of my favorite examples on the console RPG side is definitely Dragon Quest IX, which was it hit at something that I had always wanted, which is being able to play a traditional turn-based Dragon Quest style RPG, but with a friend that you're adventuring together and like you're all making decisions, you're looting together, you're dungeon crawling together. It hit on a lot of different things, and I'm kind of sad that that particular experiment never got picked up much.
Yeah.
Also, one of the big reasons that Pokemon always spoke to me was that it incorporated social multiplayer so much, but more importantly, competitive multiplayer, where I could play against my friends, and having that deep tactical experience was not readily replicated in almost any game that I've played since. Honestly,
But-
I've never really found anything quite like Pokemon competitive multiplayer. And then on the more traditional tabletop side of things, we've certainly had over the years RPGs that have dabbled in the concept of having effectively a DM, especially I believe games like Neverwinter Nights and whatnot. But maybe not enough RPGs it kind of explore that conceit of being able to turn the tabletop experience truly into RPG form. And maybe especially as with the growth of AI and other conceits, maybe we'll start to see that more.
but have you ever played Divinity Original Sin 2?
Yeah.
Because
And
for
they
me
have a
that
whole
is
DM mode and everything. Yeah.
no, but I mean like in the multiplayer with friends. I think that is
yeah.
for me the closest I ever got to playing tabletop RPGs, but in with a computer with friends. It was like such an amazing experience how the quests are imagined that each person has different goals and want different things, and you can like sabotage the others.
Yes.
Yeah, Divinity Original Sin 2 hit on something kind of magical, I think, with the way that it approached its multiplayer. And it certainly is what I think really set it above and kind of elevated Larian to where it is now, especially as we have Baldur's Gate 3 on the way. In the meantime, we've been talking a lot about Octopath Traveler 2, a game that I did buy. I got a code for. I installed.
Yeah.
I started playing it. I messed with the settings, and the HD 2D isn't hurting my eyes as much anymore. And I started with the Beast character.
Yeah, Ochette.
Good start.
I'm
Good start.
starving. That's her war cry. I love her.
I picked the owl.
That's the right choice. That's the meta pick. You did well.
That's the meta pick?
Yeah, it's the meta pick.
Okay. I was like, I should pick the dog. Oh, but the owl's pretty.
The dog
That's
hits
very pretty.
the dog hits weapon weaknesses, and the owl hits elemental weaknesses. And on the whole,
see.
it's easier for Ochette to hit weapon weaknesses than it is for her to hit.
Yeah, because she's got a lot
elemental.
of range.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not that far, but I promise that I will keep digging into Octopath Traveler 2 because everybody is so excited about it. And Felipe, you said that you were kind of, what shall we say, converted a little bit hearing everybody praise it.
Yeah, I like you mentioned on your podcast, like I bounced out of the first because it was like, oh, it's really cute and it has that nostalgic combat, but there was no substance. And now I just hear everyone praising this game so much. I'm just like, okay, maybe I should try it.
Yeah.
Kat, you started with Ochette, and you said it kind of plays like the first game still. Yeah, Ochette is definitely the most basic of the, starters.
Yeah,
I find.
her
Like I
and
started with
Agnia
her
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, but once you get to the other characters, like things really take off in terms of the story and the systems and the characters and whatnot. Except I've been going around all week driving my husband crazy, talking like Particio, saying, "I'm gonna eliminate the devil called poverty. Who wants to join me?" That's so. I love that asshole, and his theme is so good it should be illegal. It's ridiculous how good his theme is.
Yeah. It sounds like a Street Fighter 2 stage theme. Like that's the level of banger it goes at.
It's my favorite kind of music in games.
But the thing that surprised me at first and continues to surprise me is now I'm currently at about 85 hours into the game and finishing out all the character paths. All of them are kind of like really good elevator pitches of what if we took those original Octopath 1 classes, which were very bog standard. There's like, here's your warrior, he wants to go around and fight people. Oh, and here's your mage, he sure wants to learn things from books. Maybe there's bad things in the books. Who could say?
Who can say?
Whomst indeed can say whether there are bad things in the books.
Everyone has their like stories kind of turned on their heads in interesting ways. So Oswald is one of the more obvious, where he is basically Count of Monte Cristo, the RPG. His family was killed by a rival and he's put in jail and he has to escape from jail to go get revenge. It's the Count of Monte Cristo. And then it gets even more Alexander Dumas as the story goes on. But even Temenos, one of my favorite characters, an agnostic priest who does not believe in the church, has no faith in the church, and he's an inquisitor. And his whole job is to doubt. He is to doubt the people that he believes are using the faith that he believes in for wrong, and to find them and to take them out. And I love that character arc. It's so good and so refreshing. Casti, I finished Casti's story earlier this week, and it is an absolute banger of an RPG story. Now that I'm doing some of the final bosses, I'm really starting to respect the work that they did making incredible encounters in this game, because some of these final bosses in the paths are intense, memorable, cinematic. Like all the things that you want out of like a final boss, they just pull every Like there's no expense spared. They do every cool thing they can throw at you, and all of it ties the paths and all the things that you've done with that character in so neatly and so well that it is frankly just it's amazing. This is my game of the year front runner by a mile.
Wow.
And in a year where like I know Zelda's on the horizon, I know 16's on the horizon, I know potentially Rebirth and Starfield are on the horizon.
You heard the good news about Fire Emblem Engage.
Look,
That's a great game, too.
Cat,
I love it.
I like Fire Emblem, but I love Octopath too. Like this game has won me over in a way I did not think it was going to. And is honestly, if I was going to sit down and somebody was like, I want a classic RPG experience. I want to play just a good old fashioned feel good RPG. It's Octopath 2. It's that. This is comfort food in the purest, most beautiful form. So
Comfort food.
yeah.
Well, that's a phrase we haven't used in a while now.
Yeah.
It's also
RPG
just
comfort food.
I mean, you can go into depth with our episode with Schreier, but the way that it kind of leaves you to solve things on your own with its side quest and its map is really compelling. I was just saying before the show started, I was in the town, I think it's called the Brightlands town. I forget the exact name, but it's basically capitalist hellhole. And the town, since it's where the steam engine is being manufactured and improved upon, is just full of espionage. Like every person who you look into their stories, they're all out to kill someone. There's one character who just destroyed me laughing, where for some reason he's immune to poison. And so all the assassins in the town have taken bets who could poison him first. So this poor guy's Rasputin, and they're all experimenting on him. That's hilarious, and it's terrible and it's dark, but it's the kind of thing that you get if you take the time to look through all these side stories. And Octopath Traveler, too, they did a really good job. I'm as surprised as Eric, really, and I love the first game.
Yeah.
I see that Octopath Traveler 2 is the Xenoblade Chronicles 3
It kind of is.
2023,
But
where Eric and Nadia are going to be like, but Octopath Traveler 2, a game that I've put 150 hours into, is the greatest game.
But I was like this
of
at
all
hour
time.
10. I was like this at hour 10. Like it did not, like, that's the thing that's amazed me. And I'll even say this was a problem with Xenoblade, is Xenoblade did not maintain momentum. It had its starts and stops. And I think the side quests in Xenoblade, while good, are not as interesting as Octopath, because Octopath, like we talked about, brings you into the world. All the path actions that you can do to kind of like talk to people, like they pull some things at the end of the game that I desperately want to spoil in the spoiler cast, where you do things with path actions and they just open up in a way that feel they remind me of times when I've played Zero Escape or stuff like that. You know, when you play a game and you like do something and you're like, am I supposed to be doing this?
Yeah. There's a lot of
Should
that.
am I allowed to do this? And the game's like, yes, you are. Yes. No, keep going. Keep going. And it's like kind of pulling you along, tugging you along. Like, here's your systems. Now break them. And that's the combat too. Oh my, I'm so broken in this game right now. I'm beating enemies like 20 levels higher than me because I've just developed this cursed strategy that works so well. And it's so rewarding to have that in a game where it's like, hey, you want to bust the system wide open? We will reward you for being smart and figuring out how the system works. And yeah, it is just an amazing thing. Between this and Chained Echoes, like, people are just feasting right now for these classically inspired RPGs.
Truly. As I had already mentioned, we're streaming for a lot of people right now, and so a lot of people are reacting in the chat. And Joao Aruda said, watch you guys while grinding on Bravely Default 2. Perfect. That is a great choice for an RPG. Yeah. Love Bravely Default 2 a lot. And and my one you wanted to know, did you finish Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Eric?
The Fifth Amendment tells me that I don't have to answer that question. So I will plead it.
Just do it. Just finish it, man.
Yeah, but
is this like me stopping at the final quest of Fallout 4 because I didn't want it to end?
Yeah, kind of. Except Xenoblade's a good game, so.
Oh.
Wow, you're betraying Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Tisk. Nadia, I'm almost hesitant to bring up Final Fantasy XIV, but I'm just kind of fascinated because you wrote, building a nightclub for moon rabbits in Final Fantasy XIV. One of them is building a temple to summon a demon, ?
Yeah, so
Is
Final
this like
Fantasy
Call to the Lamb stuff going on here?
Heck yeah.
basically Final Fantasy 14 patch 6.35 has like quests now where you can help. There's a basically the moon is sitting like dormant in Final Fantasy 14, and it was supposed to be part of a big thing. It didn't happen, but you can build a nightclub now for these. You know the naming ways, right, from Final Fantasy 4, the little rabbit dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are a race in Final Fantasy 14. They're called Loporits. So I'm helping them build this like nightclub, and doing that kind of involves doing like these kind of grindy fetch quests for everybody. And one of the quests I'm doing is getting like seems to be paraphernalia for one of the naming ways. This one called Thrilling Way, who is looking to summon a demon or something. Nobody knows what he's doing, but they say, "Oh, can you do it for him, please?" So I mean, it's his dream. The whole big thing is we have to realize our dreams, and his dream is to summon a demon. Then
Hey,
we have to we have to encourage him. So yeah,
they're valid. Their dreams are
exactly.
valid.
Mhm,
I
mhm,
support
mhm.
them.
So the way this probably is going to work is that as I get higher leveled in the quest, something's going to come of it, and it's going to be pretty horrific. But I love the the Loporits. They're
They're
too freaking
adorable.
cute.
They're so good.
I love the way they say the word bugger all the time. They're like,
Mhm.
I bugger these ears, I can't hear bugger all. Like, it's hilarious coming out of their little mouths.
Felipe, did you ever get into Final Fantasy 14? Did you hear the good news about Final Fantasy 14?
No, I'm very sorry. Like MMOs is my big blind spot. I never played
No,
anything
it's okay. I'm
since.
kind of relieved, honestly.
No, like ever since World of Warcraft, I stopped in Pandaria and never went back.
Mm.
Oh,
That is
really?
fair. That is fair. Eric and Nadia, big Final Fantasy 14 people. In fact, Nadia, you just released Charlie and Dropouts this
Yes.
past week. Yeah,
It
that's our
is
Final Fantasy 14 podcast.
It is a free episode, so everyone is welcome to listen to it. If you subscribe at the $5 level, you get an extra episode every month. But yeah, it was me, Victor Hunter, friend of the show, and one of the hosts for Charlie and Dropouts, and Eric, and we talked about the Blue Mage class and how it
Axe of
functions
the Blue God.
Axe of the Blue God, and how it functions in
Blue.
Final Fantasy 14 versus other Final Fantasy games, like for example, Strago from Final Fantasy 6, who I never used because he was expensive and weak.
It was honestly kind of a like mini job quest like we've done in the past, but
Those
for
are
Blue
fun. We need to do
Mage,
more of those.
yeah, it
Yeah, I
was
love
really
those.
good.
The Blue Mage. And Eric was throwing bombs in the chat by saying that Kamari from Final Fantasy X is his least favorite Blue Mage.
He's a bad Blue Mage.
he's
I'm
not
sorry. I
good.
love
He's an
Kamari
objectively bad Blue Mage.
because his Blue Mage the same way that I love Riku, but Riku's not a great
I love
chemist because
Riku.
they were like, let's give them cool abilities and then make you have to use overdrive to use them, and I want to use them all the time. I don't want to have to wait until I have overdrive to use them.
Wow, so many nice comments in the chat, by the way. A lot of congratulations on Axe of the Blood God 400 and people saying that they've listened to us since Active Time Babel back in the 1-Up days.
Dang,
Oh,
now that's
Lord.
dedication.
That's amazing. Incredible. Okay. It's also coming out this week, March 14th, The Legend of Heroes, Trails to Azure. It is the second episode in the Crossbell arc. It's the follow-up from Trails from Zero. Well received so far. It's got an 85 on Metacritic. And we're going to be talking about this one next week. And I think the main question that I have is, should we pick this one up? Is this one worth picking up just sight unseen, or should somebody play Trails from Zero first? And I'm going to say probably you want to play Trails from Zero before you get to Trails to Azure.
I think that most of the Trails games do connect in a way that you do want to try to play them chronologically. I did step in, but it's all kind of neatly divided into little Trails chunks. Like, you can play Trails of Cold Steel, pick that up. You don't really have to play Trails in the Sky first, although you should, because it's a really great RPG. And you do have, I mean, there's the Marvel Extended Universe, and then there's the Falcom Extended Universe, which is like this. Like, it's been going on since I was a kid. So
Falcom Extended Universe.
so you're going to see characters from other games kind of wander and say, hi, everyone. And if you know, and you're thrilled. And if you don't know, you're still like, oh, cool. Hi, character. Nice to see you. So, yeah, you can't really go wrong. But I would say, like, for example, I skipped Trails of Cold Steel too and went right to 3 and didn't have a huge problem. There's also a lot of like filler stuff that they put in if you want to read it or whatnot. But would try to go in order as much as you can. You will see characters and stuff that will make your day a little shinier.
A little shinier. Yeah, we did a Pantheon of the Blood God on Trails in the Sky, and I really enjoyed it. It was like settling in with an epic novel. That to me is we're talking about traditional RPGs. That one felt like it just fell out of the PlayStation and into my Steam Deck. It was kind of
But
wonderful.
it also kind of gets rid of all the jank that came with playing against like the PlayStation.
It was a little janky.
Gotta keep the jank, but not as bad as like, waiting for summons to go for 5 hours in Final Fantasy VII or whatever.
That's not jank. That's part of the spectacle. Come on.
There you go. It's a character.
It's part of the charm.
Builds character.
What I'm sure Felipe is thinking, what is an RPG without jank? Truly.
Truly, yes.
If you're not getting jank, you're doing it wrong.
I'm 100% for the flawed gems and all the if exactly like you said, like if it's not janky, then you're not being bold enough.
I like you, Felipe. I like you.
Felipe, Arcana of Magic Obscurum, one of the jankiest RPGs of all time.
One of the best RPGs of all time, you mean?
Why do people love it so much?
I mean, it is a game.
Do we have an hour? Okay.
I'll just say this. Okay. The bad parts, the combat is absolute garbage, and the second half of the game is unfinished. So these are like kind of like bad parts of the game, you can say. What is good is everything else, from the quest design to the absolute, let's say, the way they handle the setting. This whole thing about like moral decisions about you have a fantasy setting going through industrial revolution. And all questions like, oh, can you put orcs to work in factories for lower wages than you would pay a human? Can you use necromancy to have like undead people working as factories? Like, can you do that?
Oh my god, that's terrible.
Yo, I'm into this.
Yeah. And all the things like you can go to any NPC in the game, kill them, and then use necromancy to revive the spirit and ask questions to finish quests. It's like mind-blowing.
That sounds insane, but in a great way.
All my favorite RPGs, is I've learned, sit in that area where it's like Vampire Bloodlines, one of my favorite of all time. Unfinished end of that game, and combat's terrible, but everything else about it is just pure gold. It's so good.
Like Morrowind, combat in Morrowind is terrible. Everything is amazing.
Kind of reminds me of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, where yes, it was terribly unfinished, but I think because all the jank was really funny most of the time instead of game breaking, it just barely got away with it. Like, I saw scenes where people would be like playing and watching a nice cutscene, and then like a Pokemon would just like come on the screen and scream for half a second. Like, seriously, I swear to God, Five Nights at Freddy's, and just that kind of thing. When I saw it on Twitter, I died. Like, I still can't play the game. I'm going to wait till there's less jank. I don't know if it'll ever happen, but that made my day when it happened. Five Nights at Pokemon.
Five Nights at Pokemon. The jank. All right, that's it for what we have been playing. And now it's time for a series of random encounters. Starfield has been officially delayed to September 6th, which I'm personally grateful for, because I don't have to choose between my children now. I can go right from Final Fantasy 16 and Diablo 4 onto Starfield. Thank you, Bethesda. I'm so happy. Xbox is officially hosting a showcase in June, but will not have an E3 show floor presence. Forspoken sales have been lackluster, and the games that they expected to do better did not, says Square Enix. What a surprise! They got absolutely no marketing support, and Square Enix is constantly dragging its own games, and they're like, actually, surprise Pikachu face, these games aren't doing well. I don't understand.
Gee, they just stuffed them all in a blunderbuss and shot them at the end of the year and said, like, we're all supposed to scatter like chicken and grab them.
We gave you everything you wanted. Why didn't you buy it? We put Tactics Ogre on your Steam Deck.
this is secondhand, but supposedly the teams all got to set their own release dates, and they all just kind of clumped together in the same spot.
God.
Hell
That's
yeah.
a great idea.
It's the
Yes,
Simpsons
please.
bit of all the diseases inside Mr. Burns trying to shove through the door.
And also, Square Enix doesn't really have a marketing department anymore, so none of these games are getting support. They throw their support behind all the bad games and then don't support the good games. Though, I mean, we have the Forspoken rehabilitation has already begun, as we saw last week.
It's
with Ash Parish.
Look, I have not played Forspoken, to be clear, but I do think that game, like many video games nowadays, just got shoved into the middle of a giant tizzy online because it was the latest thing everybody could fight about online. And I tire of that. It sounds like it was a fine, like capital F fine video game. It's not gonna blow the doors off, but it's not, name whatever broken mess you want here. But
Indeed. Speaking of broken messes, a patch is in the works for the Outer Worlds Spacer's Choice Edition, as players have reported performance issues, and there have been apologies for that one. That's the version that brought together all of the DLC and whatnot on PS5. Obsidian, they're under Xbox, but some things just never change. Pokemon users are reporting save file issues after the most recent update, though the pool seems small, at the least, for now. It's unclear what is causing these save file issues. Stay frosty out there. Maybe don't connect Pokemon Go to this one.
Yeah.
League of Legends MMO producer Greg Ghostcrawler Street is leaving Riot, and Wargroove is getting a sequel. Wargroove 2. It's the best Advance Wars. Not an RPG, but it's RPG. What? Did you just say that Advance Wars is an RPG? What the?
No, you said Wargroove is the best Advance Wars?
Clone.
Oh, clone. Okay, I was like, no, Cat, wheel that one back, bring it back on in. Okay.
No, Advance Wars blows the doors off Wargroove.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I like Wargroove.
I actually found it rather boring.
I think Wargroove's, again, capital F fine, and I'm interested to see what they do with the sequel.
Yeah, there was some balancing issues, but something they can kind of vault over as they make a sequel, so it'll probably be pretty good.
But our main topic is, it's Axe of the Blood God, episode 400, and it's time to return to the discourse that has driven this podcast since day one, that has been a fundamental part of our Discord experience. Remove the number days since we asked, what is an RPG? Reset the clock. We're talking about what is an RPG. We're going all the way back to the beginning, episode 1 of Axe of the Blood God, which is titled appropriately, What is an RPG? And we had, at that time, Jeremy Parrish and Bob Mackey and myself, and maybe Mike Williams, I can't remember. And we asked the question. And it's been 400 episodes. I feel like I've learned a lot. At the beginning of Buffy the Vampire Slayer season 5, episode 1, they have, or the season finale, they have a moment where they show a still screen from every single episode up until that point in a very rapid fire montage. And that's what I'm thinking of right now. But yeah, no, I feel like I've learned a lot about RPGs and how RPGs are made and the origins of RPGs. In episode Axe of the Blood God 300, we talked about the earliest days of the genre, the roots of the genre. We talked about Ultima and Wizardry and the games that were most formative for the genre. I think that's really key to understanding what, quote unquote, is an RPG, what the formative parts of it. And during the discourse that was caused by Naoki Yoshida when he said that the term Japanese RPG is somewhat discriminatory in his mind, I said that in my mind, you could say RPGs are like a tree, a mana tree, you might say. And at the roots are Tolkien and war games. And then you have games like Ultima and Wizardry, Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons is like the part that goes up above Tolkien and war games. And then you have Ultima and Wizardry. And then you have then you have Dragon Quest. And Dragon Quest splits into its own branch. And then the branches keep spreading out until you have this sprawling, huge oak Redwood, perhaps, since I'm based in California. What's your take on this analogy, Felipe? Like you're a scholar, you know a lot about RPGs, so I'm curious what you think.
Okay, I'm going to bring a bit of a controversial take here.
Ooh.
That is like, I don't think you can. Yes, you can say like it's RPGs, computer RPG starts in from D&D,
Mm-hmm.
but I think from the very start, it was never the moment they went to computers. It was never a single tree. It was already like a giant orchard or something like this. And this is, I think, let's say, the biggest revelation I had when studying the history of RPGs is that we have a very distorted view of what the past actually was. Because when you think about, let's say, RPGs in the 80s, or like in, you're thinking about, yeah, Wizardry, you're thinking about Ultima, then Wasteland, and these classic games, but you're not thinking about all the others that were there, that, let's say, maybe they were even more popular, or maybe they were like um, more critically acclaimed, but then we don't have the legacy right now.
Right.
And this is something that happens all the time. Like a lot of people talk about how like action RPGs really appeared in the 90s, but you have them since like 81. You already have a bunch of action RPGs.
I guess
And
Temple of Apshri, would that qualify as an action RPG or?
I mean, we have, let's say, you could say that qualifies because a lot of those games, they have that system where it's turn based, but the turn
Right.
is based on seconds, and it goes so fast that, let's say, if you don't push the, let's say, the controller for like 1 second, the other characters are moving, so it's
Yeah.
almost like real time. Let's say,
Yeah.
it's real time on a very low frame rate. You can put it this
Yes.
way.
Yeah, good point.
But you have a lot of variations of this, and I think when we start to look into what is an RPGs and all the evolutions, because we focus so much on the big names, we get kind of surprised that we have all these parallel evolutions going on. And I think my best example is one that appeared actually after I finished the first edition of the book, which is the whole origin. You were talking about the Falcon games and everything. The whole origin of the entire Trails in the Sky and the entire like the how they call the Dragon Slayer
Dragon
series.
Slayer, yeah.
Yeah, the whole Dragon Slayer series actually comes from a game called The Caverns of Freytag, which is a 1982 game that it has the same thing that we're talking about now. It's turn-based, but like with very short timing. So it's based like real time with low frame rate.
Yeah.
And it's a very niche and very obscure American game. But one Japanese developer made a tweet, I think like 5 years ago, saying like, oh yeah, we began making the first Dragon Slayer. It was inspired by this game that I found.
Wow.
And that, when you look at them, it's obvious, like they're basically the same game. And you have a niche game from the United States going all the way to Japan, because Falcon was originally an Apple II importer in Japan. A developer in Japan found this game and starts making Dragon Slayer, which is one of the pillars in Japan for the whole action RPGs in Japan. So when you start tracing all this influence and these evolutions, you start seeing that RPGs from the very start, they were not only much more varied than we imagined, there were much more things than just like Ultima and Wizardry and Rogue, but also that this influence between like United States and Japan and other regions, it keeps going back and forth. It's not just like Wizardry, Ultima, Dragon Quest, and then it spreads forever. No,
There
they
was
keep coming
always
back.
cross-pollination.
Exactly, and that is really interesting when you start like to accompany that through history. Like we were talking in the pre-show, like how Planescape Torment not only reference Final Fantasy on the credits, the developers thank Final Fantasy 7 and 8 for the inspiration, but they have summon animations just like Final Fantasy 7. So you wouldn't imagine that like one of the icons of PC RPGs is taking so many influence from Final Fantasy 7 and 8. And this is like a constant throughout the entire history of RPGs.
Absolutely.
And even in Japan, say, the developers were playing each other's games and taking ideas from it. I remember not too long ago, I think it was from the Fire Emblem Engage, or it was for the Fire Emblem Three Houses episode, maybe, reading an interview between Sakaguchi and the creator of Fire Emblem, and they were having a conversation and saying like, "Oh no, yeah, I was totally inspired by Final Fantasy. It was like really cool." And Sakaguchi being like, "Yeah, when Fire Emblem came out, we played it because nobody had ever seen anything like it, and we were kind of fascinated by the permadeath mechanic, and like what's up with that and everything, the difficulty, and we couldn't really wrap our heads around it." And yeah, somebody was describing it in the chat as a network,
A
with
web
a series
almost.
of exchanges,
A Mobius strip, yeah.
a Mobius strip.
Series
Or
of tubes.
you think of it as almost like DNA,
Mm-hmm.
where they're like base proteins and everything, but then at the same time it's all so intertwined and complex that as to not be able to tease them apart. I'm glad to know that my analogy that I was so proud of was incredibly simplistic.
No, I don't think it was simplistic. I think it's just like instead of a tree, it's just several trees, because like you have a lot of
Forest.
different starting
A
points.
forest.
But yeah, exactly.
It's almost
An
like
orchard, they're all bearing different
Wow,
fruit.
we really missed
no,
the
I think-
forest for the trees there, huh?
Oh,
bamboo kind of shares the same root, something like that.
Yeah, interesting. I was telling Felipe before the episode that my own history with RPGs, I think that where you start with RPGs is pretty fundamental to your understanding of RPGs. And personally, I started with Pokemon, Final Fantasy VII, classic console RPGs from the 90s. And it wasn't until was already in the games media that I really started to discover the classics like Black Isle Studios and BioWare, and like the old school BioWare games. I was certainly aware of games like KOTOR and whatnot. So I've always kind of looked at RPGs through a particular lens. But then I know people like our friend of the show, Jason Wilson, who grew up in the 80s, and he was playing all of the classics, as it were, on PC. And over time, there have been different philosophies that have kind of grown out of different RPGs. I mean, in the 80s, a lot of them were trying to be a holodeck. Sandboxes.
Yeah.
Had pretty poor stories. Whereas a lot of the maybe the games that were being developed in Japan were more manga based, more story based,
For sure.
more art based. And I'm not saying that, as we said, it's all interconnected. There are certainly RPGs developed in Japan that are not story based, as it were. Just go play A Train Odyssey. That game doesn't have a story. Are you kidding me? It's a
up the tree.
PC RPG all the way down. But you have your much more. You have your open world. You have your open world RPGs like the that are really trying to, like Skyrim, for example, that are in the best tradition of old school RPG design.
Yeah.
And then you have your like, it's all about the story, like Octopath Traveler 2. But then all the systems also come into play. I don't even know what point I'm trying to make. I'm just kind of rambling. This is what this topic does.
The point is, 13 Sentinels is an RPG.
Yes, it is. But the thing you brought up that I think is interesting is that it is a network, and we are trying to, like, you know, break down the taxonomy through games. But something you hit on, and that I think is important, is that art doesn't just reflect previous art within its own medium, but it reflects art throughout many mediums. I mean, you can't look at early Dragon Quest and not also consider like the popularity of Shonen Jump and things like that.
Absolutely.
And I think it's super cool to go back and look at some of this stuff, not just in the context of game timelines and how games evolved. Even within other genres of games, people were being inspired by things. So many times I've interviewed developers, and I'll go in expecting, when I ask them, you know, what was your inspiration for this? And I'll expect them to talk about things within their genre, you know, obvious predecessors. And instead they're like, Oh, I was playing Hades and I thought about this thing. Or I was playing like other games that just inspired me in very specific ways, or even just pieces of art that really moved them. And they're like, how do I replicate this within the thing that I know how to do and the thing that I love to do? And I think RPGs are sometimes the most interesting reflections of that, because we have everything from, which RPG is it that has all the rock song references in it? Nadia, you would
Oh,
know.
that was so good. Summoner War? No, not Summoner War. That's another game. Song Summoner.
Yeah, yeah,
That was a fun ass game and just would not exist today.
I think there's an incredible way of looking at RPGs that they tend to, because of how in depth they are, because of how much creativity they inspire from their creators, and how much they have to put into these characters in this world, is that they end up reflecting the creators' inspirations in very unique and interesting ways. And that plays as much a part in the lineage of RPGs as anything else does.
Well, I'm always I'm always yelling about how Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, how much that inspired a lot of movies that came out. Sorry, a lot of games that came afterward. Tetsuya Nomura was such a huge fan of Baz Luhrmann, and I guess I just remember looking at Romeo and Juliet after playing like so many years of games. I'm like, holy shit, these characters are like, there's Prompto, there's like, Waka, like they all look the same and they all like talk the same way, and it was great. I love it. I had that article on Inverse. Go look it up. It's actually pretty fun.
We talked about this on the Monolith Soft dev quest, but like Takahashi loved Gunpla, loved Gundams,
Just a little bit.
and
I love that story.
That stuff is so crucial. That stuff is so important to not just understanding how we got individual RPG games, but how these important pieces of media shaped the genre, because then other games would take inspirations from that. It's this like trickle down effect of all these media inspirations.
He
But
puts
meanwhile,
the Gunpla on the table, says, "Here's my pitch for a game. This is a Gunpla." Yes.
it's like Hideaki, I know. Look, I grew up with Ultraman, Godzilla, and Gundam, and goddamn it, I'm gonna make an anime about them.
I am qualified in ways you do not know.
And you know what is really funny? Because like we're very used to, let's say, the North American games and the Japanese games, like.
Mm-hmm.
But when you move outside of those, so when you go into the French jRPGs from the 80s, when they were like very inspired, especially by the graphical novels, you see like, and those are games like made by Ubisoft, like the very first games that Ubisoft made in the 80s.
Yeah.
The aesthetic and the whole logic of the game is completely different from anything we have even now. Like nothing was compared to, let's say, go back to 1989 when Ubisoft made BAT, which is like the Bureau of Astrotechnological Detectives or something like this. It's a completely like bizarre RPG where you're set in a city in a sci-fi world, and it's an open world game where you explore every corner of the city in a comic book faction. So every like place is like a panel in a comic.
Oh, like Comic Zone on the Genesis.
No, it's like, even because it's ecstatic, you don't walk, you just like click through panels.
Oh, I see.
And it's actually like an open world, like almost like GTA. So you can go into a bar, you can drink, you can go like into a casino and you can play. Like they were making like that kind of holodeck thing, but with a comic book aesthetic. And it's something completely unique, inspired by French graphic novels. And you look at that, no one ever did something like this. Even the French didn't do anything like this again, because they had those very specific influences. Another one of those that I met during like my research was the Chinese ones. The Chinese RPGs, they are heavily inspired by wuxia novels.
Yes.
So the swordsman things, especially the novels by Jin Yong, which is like people say like the Chinese Lord of the Rings, but in terms of, let's say, of influence. And this led to a lot of different decisions in how they handle story, how they handle romance, their approach to games. While, let's say, in the West, we were still doing like very basic stories were like, oh, you defeat the evil wizard and you kill a dragon and everything. They were already doing like very complex stories, because they were doing like in, let's say, 1991, they were already doing like complete adaptations of novels into RPGs, like chapter by chapter. So their stories were much
Right.
richer than what we had. And it's really interesting to see these influences, because then you can go back to American games or go back to Japanese games and see how they differ in this way.
But then, as Zero Lex said, now they're making Assassin's Creed mediocre RPGs, and I guess that brings me
Hey
to the next. I
now.
mean, they are, and that brings me to the next part of this discussion. I think is the so-called RPG elements, which is recently, in fact, this week we didn't mention in random encounters, but Suicide Squad: Kill the Justice League was delayed, reportedly, because of the poor reception. And a piece of the poor reception was that everybody saw loot scores and nonsense skill trees that they had just cribbed and put into this game that's a live service game, I guess. And it's going to have a battle pass. And at some point, these developers took the fundamentals of RPGs, the building blocks, and used them for evil. They realized
Yes.
that grinding equals engagement. And such, the fundamental pieces were corrupted, turned into a bad place.
And then
we
the
got
Fire
games
Nation
like
attacked.
Destiny, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League, the freaking legion of open world, just we called them game loaf game loaf games, primarily Ubisoft, that position themselves as RPGs, but they have no soul. They are soulless and corrupted.
So the thing I'm going to bring up here is, again, that I think broader context is important, because yes, they have used RPG elements for bad. They have used it for evil, but this is also part of a broader trend in the gamification of every aspect of our lives. Go read some stuff about the gamification of how like Amazon warehouse workers end up in that stuff. It's bad. But
That would depress me. I don't think I could do that.
that is the thing, is like, at some point, these RPG mechanics, which already inspire long play times, heavy character investments, the feeling of growth and satisfaction in having accomplished a task that previously seemed unattainable, all these things that create really good brain feelings. Suddenly, people who want to make money figured out that they could drive engagement with it. And I don't think all number go up games are bad, to be clear. I don't play Destiny, but I follow Destiny. I think the lore of Destiny and the things that they do in that game are super cool and super interesting. I play Final Fantasy 14 because I'm a broken man, but it's like,
Numbers go up.
I do think, especially for some games, especially for some publishers, I'm looking specifically at Warner Brothers, because not only do we have the Suicide Squad and Gotham Knights, both of which had servicey game things in there, but even Injustice 2 for some reason had loot in it, and I still don't understand why.
It all started with World of Warcraft.
Yeah, and it's
They looked at the color-coded
gnarly.
loot and realized that people wanted that color-coded loot. That, like, wow, colors. And then having that hook, having that carrot, would invariably keep people playing. Publishers watched World of Warcraft very closely, and then Destiny came along. We all know what happened to that. Destiny found a way to consolize, shooterize. They'd found a way to turn World of Warcraft into a damn shooter.
yeah.
And we were off. And since then, various games have tried to capture what Destiny was able to do, except they don't understand that the reason that Destiny is successful is because it's a damn good shooter.
Well, and
it's a really, really good shooter. And that's what
Destiny-
keeps dragging people in, and they're willing to put up with the grind, and it has an aesthetic. And you just can't be Destiny. You can't. Sorry, Suicide Squad, Kill the Justice League. You can't be freaking Destiny.
And Destiny was not immediately good either.
No, it took a
Important
while.
point to make is that Destiny, I would say up until Taken King, did not really become what it is today. Launch Destiny was not great. And a lot of games are trying to I mean, they do the same with Fortnite, right? They try to make this
Yeah.
thing. They see one company doing something successful, and they do the Tobias Funke. Well, it hasn't worked for anybody else, but maybe it'll work for us. And
R.I.P. First Soldier.
yeah, I think the weirder part is all of this stuff being shoved into distinctly single player game experiences. I have on this podcast expressed that I was not a fan of God of War Ragnarok. I'm not a fan of Horizon. I'm really like that design of we took this really like good single player game and put a bunch of loot numbers and modifiers in
Put
it.
a
Like
lot of frankly nonsense.
imagine if The
Just
Last of Us had that
stats
loot
that
system
make
in
no
there.
difference.
Like I whatever your feelings are on The Last of Us, I think everybody can agree is extremely well crafted, polished, extremely interesting thing. And a lot of games have tried to do that, but they've tried to do that while putting those numbers on there. And can you imagine going back and playing The Last of Us and you're in this like emotional experience with Joel and Ellie, and all of a sudden Joel's like, I picked up a pistol and it's got plus 2% critical attack. And
Against zombies. No, wait, they're not zombies.
yeah. Now Professor Roche in the comments in the chat is correct. Joel does need more sexy gotcha outfits, but that is
I agree.
completely
I'm sold.
different.
Your argument's
Joel.
blown apart.
I mean, Pedro Pascal
I'm
is
in an
quite sexy.
SSR outfit.
Going
Ellie, where'd you
back,
find this?
somebody in the chat said, I blame Diablo personally. And this hits at an interesting point of discourse that goes way back in the RPG community, because Diablo gave us color-coded loot. And when we think of a Diablo, we think, well, it's an RPG-ass RPG. It has its roots in roguelikes back in the day, pure
not
dungeon
really.
crawling. It was going to be turn-based, but then it got turned into an action-based game and introduced a lot of fundamentals. Interestingly enough, it cribbed skill trees from strategy games, but made them into what we think of it as a fundamental part of RPGs, gave us socketed items and everything. But when Diablo came out, there was a ton of discourse in the PC RPG community. This isn't an RPG. What the hell? Stop calling it an RPG. You can't have a freaking action-based click, 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 click RPG and be it. And Felipe's
mouse
nodding
go
emphatically,
brr.
going, yeah, that was discourse,
But-
all right.
I think like there's 2 points. First, you had those people saying that, and even like into the 2000s, they were like, "Oh, Diablo 2 destroy games because now you have like damage per second. What is this? Like you used to attack like once
DPS.
every round, and now you have DPS. This is nonsense." But also, the people who say like RPGs are not like real time and everything, I think that is part of the distorted view we have of history. Because let me tell you something about the 90s. When people talk about PC RPGs in the 90s, they usually talk about 2 time periods, right? In the early 90s, you have games like Ultima 7, Ultima Underworld, you have Darklands, you have Betrayal at Krondor. And at the end of the 90s, you have the classics like Fallout, Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, System Shock, and those things, right?
Yeah.
In the middle of the 90s, what was happening was the golden age of real-time dungeon crawlers. So we had Eye of the Beholder 1, 2, and 3. We had Anvil of Dawn. We had Lands of Lore 1, 2, and 3. We had Interplay, who in 1995 was spending $5 million to make one of the most expensive video games of the 90s. That was Stonekeep. There was like their response to Phantasmagoria was to make a real-time dungeon crawler with FMV, with real actors, to be the big hit. Was like the AAA video game of the 90s.
Yeah.
Lands of Lore 1, they had Patrick Stewart doing the voice of the king because it was also like one of the biggest release. Those are all real-time RPGs about dodging creatures and attacking and everything. And those were like the big hits, the big sellers of the mid-90s. So someone then going, oh, Diablo is not a real RPG. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like,
You missed the bus on that one, buddy.
It's funny, in your big thread, which I encourage people to read on Twitter about in response to the Naoki Yoshida discourse, you referenced Scorpia, who was a columnist for Computer Gaming World back in the day. And it's funny to go back and read her columns from the early 90s saying it was the absolute worst time to be an RPG fan. RPGs are dying.
Summer child.
All I want to
Summer
do
child.
is play Ultima 4. This is the absolute worst. And I mean, it was kind of a crappy time to be a PC RPG fan, certainly in the early 90s, the rise of multimedia and everything. There was a whole thing where Ultima Underworld, and this is a piece of something I want to ask Felipe in a second. Ultima Underworld comes out and dramatically outsells a classic Ultima game, much to Richard Garriott's chagrin. He's like, what the hell? People were playing shooters. People were playing Doom. They were playing FPSs. That's what they wanted. And so there was a sense that RPGs, much like strategy games, classic war games from the 80s, were old, outdated, and that kind of thing. Which brings me to my next question, Felipe. System Shock 2, RPG or nah?
Oh, dearie me.
Oh,
I don't think we can go like, for me, it's 100% an RPG. But then I think like it goes to the broader question of what is an RPG. And I think it's simply impossible. Let me tell you a trivia, a little story. Are you all familiar with the Berlin interpretation of roguelikes?
yeah,
No.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm the
Eric
one.
does.
I
No.
for
No.
really
Yes. No.
no, for a really dumb reason. I am aware of this definition. Yeah.
Okay, so a quick story there. Roguelikes are one of the oldest styles of video games, not only of RPGs. Like
Right.
they go back from the 70s. And during all of history, they were like a really hardcore, really niche type of RPGs, right? They were turn-based, they had no graphics, was like everything text, really like difficult games. But then, in the mid-2000s, you start having games like Spelunky, calling itself a roguelike, or like being called a roguelike, or with roguelike inspirations. And what happens then is that a bunch of roguelike, old school roguelike developers go into a conference in Berlin and they draft the laws of what a roguelike must have, a true roguelike. So they go, it's very important that it has turn-based combat, that is set in a randomly procedurally generated area, that if you die, you lose everything. They set all these things. And like high priority things, low priority, like it has to be a dungeon, it has to have ASCII graphics and everything.
Yeah.
And they say, okay, these are the rules. And what happens? Not a single person followed those rules. No, it completely destroys. After that, you have games like Hades, like Binding of Isaac, like Slay the Spire, completely destroying the genre. And I think that is wonderful, because there was a lot of criticism for the Berlin interpretation, because it was constraining what a roguelike could be. It was like making a little club. They're like, oh, you made a roguelike, but it's not fantasy, it's sci-fi. Like, I'm not sure you should be in the club with us. And
Gatekeeping.
then, yeah, exactly. It's pure gatekeeping
Oh,
and
you
trying
don't
to
you don't play a
impose something.
real roguelike. Interesting. Tell
Yeah,
me more
like-
about your lack of an identification test.
No, it is 100% like as a teenager who was a huge metalhead, is all of us going like, yeah, Slipknot is not a true metal band. Like, corn? You mean popcorn? Haha. It's like,
Never
it's
heard
like,
that one. That's great.
yeah, because like, I am listening to Metallica and Iron Maiden, like true metal bands, not this popular garbage. Like, it's the same kind of sentiment, and I completely understand like forging your identity and a community around this and getting angry when people invade it. Like, I am still kind of angry that Bethesda made what they did with Fallout 3. But, it's part of the process of growing up. And I think it is important to have this because it's what gave us, let's say, Fallout New Vegas later. If
Yeah.
they just simply went like, okay, no one can do Fallout unless it's like isometric and has to be turn-based and has to be this. So, over time, I think it's part of like the maturing process, not only of the genre, but also the people playing the genre, that you accept these differences. So that is basically my stance on RPGs. I think that I try to have the broadest as possible definition. And if someone comes from something outside of that, say, I want to make an RPG and this is what I'm doing, I'm really interested in that. And on that point, I really think System Shock 2 is an RPG, not only because it fits all the requirements that like I personally have, but also because its roots are 100% in RPG. It's inspired by Mega Traveler, the starting process of the game, when you go through the career, they choose, oh, I want to be a Marine, then go to spend 2 years on Mars training to get one more constitution and stuff like this. This is directly taken from Mega Traveler, and it's like pure RPG goodness. I really like that thing.
Mm-hmm.
There you
Yeah.
have it, everybody. System Shock 2 is an RPG. Goes in the Pantheon,
At least for me.
I wanted to springboard off that because we had this discussion like a couple weeks ago where the quote from Yoshida about jRPGs, and this is coming through Koji Fox, but I wanted to pull this quote up from the Skill Up interview that we had around the 16 coverage. Koji Fox said, one thing Yoshida wants to get across is that when we create games, we don't go into them thinking we are creating JRPGs, we are just creating RPGs. The term JRPG is used by Western media rather than users in media in Japan. And I think like everyone got in a tizzy because they're all like, what do you mean I've been saying the wrong thing? It was all dumb, it was all stupid. But it highlights a very important thing that like people who make these games want to make these games, and trying to ascribe that sort of Berlin interpretation of RPGs to them ends up limiting any amount of what we can imagine them to be. And I don't want to imagine a world where Disco Elysium is suddenly not considered an RPG because it doesn't
It's an
have
adventure game.
Yeah, I've heard people argue that, and Disco
Give me a
Elysium
break.
is closer to a tabletop RPG in the most classical sense than most RPGs are today. And that's why it's interesting. That's why Citizen Sleeper to me is an RPG. It's not a visual novel. And I think it's important that we recognize that people are doing things that, yes, they warp and expand and maybe challenge whatever preconceptions you have of what an RPG is, but that's a really cool, interesting thing and not something to suddenly turn your nose up at.
Like being in Japan, there is something that is really interesting here. I'm going to show you. I have here the Japanese encyclopedia of role-playing games.
Oh,
Not
cool.
of Japanese role-playing games, of role-playing games by Japanese, like their view on the genre. And it's really fascinating because it starts with the Western games. So it starts like, okay, Akalabeth, Wizardry, and all those things. But the moment you start reaching the 90s, it completely cuts off all the Western games. They're like, they don't, the encyclopedia goes until the 2000s. There's not a single mention of Diablo, of Fallout, of Baldur's Gate, of like what we consider the great classics. The last Ultima that they mention is Ultima 4.
Wow.
Because for them it became like a completely different thing. And they mention games like we usually wouldn't mention. So it's a really fascinating experience to see from the other side, like what they are seeing, what they consider to be RPGs.
Absolutely.
And it was going to change, like, no matter, like, we were talking about in the pre-show about this as well. Like, as a Brazilian, when I was playing tabletop gaming during my childhood, it was not Dungeons and Dragons. It was a Brazilian system called Defenders of Tokyo. That it was 100% based on anime stuff. So your character will be like a Power Ranger, your friend will be playing like a Sakura Card Captors, and the other will have like a giant mecha.
Cool.
And this for us was like tabletop RPGs, not dragons and wizards and everything. So it all depends on your roots and where you're coming from.
Yeah,
as a whole,
even Brazil, like, you evolved in a completely different gaming atmosphere than most of the world, like with the Sega Master System versus everything else that was going on in the world. Like, it's just really fascinating how different cultures just affect different things that way. That's why I'm not really
Taxes
interested.
are a pain, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm not really interested in the RPG. What is an RPG? I don't know. I don't like labels that much. I hate to sound like
if you go to
a
Russia,
edgy teenager, but
you go to Russia, they didn't really have a lot of the traditional consoles, but they had a lot of clone consoles.
They had the Dendy, the Famicom clone.
Yeah,
Really
for us it
cute.
was the same. Like, that's why we never really had Final Fantasy VI as a big thing for us. For us, the big one was Phantasy Star. That was like the amazing classic. If you ask, like, what is a classic RPG, they'll go like Phantasy Star.
Well, it is a classic. It's in the Pantheon, don't you know?
It's a great game. Yeah, the M2 remake or revamp was excellent. I recommend it to anyone.
Geez, I had this question that I really wanted to ask Felipe, but I completely lost my train of thought, which is unfortunate. But I'm just gonna move on briefly. So, Len Hafer, a friend of the show, consider her very smart, came up with a definition of RPGs that I like, and I want to run by Felipe really quickly. We're talking about being inclusive, but also at the same time, it's kind of like, but okay, like let's sit down and really think about what is an RPG. I mean, we think about how it's sort of the Supreme Court test of I know it when I see it. But at the end of the day, like there are some games you just wouldn't call an RPG. I wouldn't call Doom an RPG. But Len says, number one, it has to have meaningful character progression for which you can gain experience from a variety of activities. Number two, it has to have some level of character or party customization. Number three, it needs to have a variety of lootable or craftable items. And number four, the emphasis in conflict resolution should be based on considerations other than pure player twitch skill, such as creating an effective build, understanding party synergies, or exploiting enemy weaknesses.
You were talking about making a definition. When I was writing the book, I spent years trying to think of a definition to put in the intro. Like, you're making a book on RPGs. What is an RPG, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to do that whole process. And the thing is, the more I try to find those definitions, and like this one is a very good one, but I'm going to get into the problem right now that when you get into those details, not only you cut some games, they're like, everyone considers them RPGs because they will not fit into those things. Like, for example, like the moment you start saying, okay, Dark Souls you can play at level 1, you can finish the game at level 1, then why does build really matters? Like, do you have any solution to problems? But for me, the biggest problem is when you do the opposite. Not when you cut games off because they don't fit the definition, but when you start to add weird ones. When you start to say, okay, by all these metrics that you're talking about, I could put GTA there. And you're like, because not only because let's say, oh, you're thinking, what is the character customization and everything? GTA San Andreas, they had the same system that Fable had. That if you go to the gym, your character gets fit and he can run longer, he's stronger, and all those kind of things. Those are like stats. They are just not showing the numbers. So that was, I think,
character customization. Your character could get fat in that game.
Yeah, like if you can explore the whole world. Like in some ways, it's what Ultima was dreaming the whole time. They're like, oh, you can like, you can bake bread. You can go into McDonald's and you can order a dish and eat and get fat. Like this is the ultimate simulation that Richard Garriott was dreaming about. Even more now,
Eating
if you
burgers.
go. Yeah, if you go now and you
Dream.
play like GTA Online, the servers that they
Yes.
did on role playing, that is like the ultimate RPG dream.
It really
But we
is.
don't call that an RPG. And like, I think that is the biggest issue. And like, in the end, my answer is that is more RPG is more like of a vibe, is more of an intention. Because what I just mentioned, like no one goes to like, let's say, Saints Row has even more stats than GTA. And you have like some choices on like how you want to do your progression and your factions and your items and all those things, your perks. Why we don't call them that an RPG? Because they don't present themselves as RPGs. They're not trying to be one. Even if they check more boxes than a lot of games that are actual RPGs, then that we consider them RPGs. So I think really at the end, what you're going for is like a mood, a vibe, an intention behind the whole process.
I think also though there are RPGs that explicitly trace their lineage back to, it gets back to the tree definition, back to the roots of the genre, war games and D&D, and then the earliest like 1980s RPGs. Like I would not say that GTA does that. I would not say that GTA is trying to capture the mood of a tabletop RPG or anything like that. Like you can't trace a lineage with GTA. And so I think that's maybe not the whole answer, but it's at least a starting point.
But the thing is, like, can you say that Wizardry is trying to capture a tabletop role-playing game? When you have one player controlling 6
absolutely.
characters at once, exploring a dungeon?
Dungeon crawling is the freaking heart of D&D. That's what it
Well,
started as. It was not about telling stories originally. It was a dungeon crawler.
I think the point though is that it's at that point D&D is about the communal experience. D&D is about interacting with other people and a party and a DM, and when you suddenly reduce that to it's like the difference between playing chess with another person, playing chess with a computer, is that now you are the AI is your DM and you're controlling a party. You're kind of playing the blackjack table by yourself, right? You're playing all the hands. And that is the same game, but in many ways it's also a fundamentally different game than the way it's intended to be played and the way it's meant to
It's
be
like
played.
moving from poker to solitaire.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's you are playing the same like concept, but now you are doing it in a different way. And also, as we've talked about many times, like the limitations early on of RPGs meant that it only feels like recently we've started to rekindle some of those ideas. Like one of the reasons I'm so excited about Baldur's Gate 3 is how Larian has been trying to reintroduce this sense of if you think it, you can do it in RPGs. The sort of like, oh, I could pick up this barrel and throw it at that goblin over there, and he'll get sent flying off that cliff, and he'll fall down a bunch of ways. Or Octopath 2, where I can use my path actions in really interesting ways to solve quests that don't just involve me doing a combat check. So, like, we're just now getting to the point, I feel, where we're starting to have those tools again. That open sandbox almost. Breath of the Wild. Hey, is Breath of the Wild an RPG? Who's to say? Who's to say?
Also, even coming from the tabletop side, you have things like the old school Renaissance thing going on with RPGs, and they will basically like disagree with you on what is the focus on role-playing games, because it's not like, oh, I'm in a dungeon killing a bunch of stuff and rolling die, but like the whole idea of improvisation and not relying so much on stats, but on like, they don't want the Dungeons and Dragons like the modern one when you have like a huge table of how you solve things. You say, I will solve this way, and then you roll a die to see if you can solve it this way. So there are many approaches to what a tabletop RPG was as well. There are people who, like, right now there are tabletop RPGs that barely even have rules. It's just about like, oh, here are like some ideas, let's play and see how it evolves. So
Make stuff up as we go along. We call that
exactly,
the
and those are really fun.
Yeah.
And like,
let's just go outside, and it goes back to I want to play. I just want to pretend. I want to play a pretend imagination game, like the kind that you would play when you were very young.
Yeah.
Except it's no fun because then you could just say, "Well, my character doesn't die. Actually, they have this magic power." You're like,
Yeah.
hold on. There's got to be some rules here, and that's when you start getting into tabletop games. But
no,
I
no,
wanted
that is
to-
when you're playing Skyrim and the character doesn't die.
Yeah.
I'm going to ignore that.
He's too cool to
Victor
die.
Hunter. Victor Hunter said, "Advanced Wars is capturing the war game vibe, but it's been said not 20 minutes ago it's not an RPG." No, it's not an RPG, because war games were a starting point, and then D&D took the primordial soup of classical war games and used that, and then applied a party building, storytelling, more personal level rather than just directing troops around a field and that kind of thing. Like Advanced Wars is closer to the 80s war games, like freaking Close Combat. Was that 80s or 90s? I can't remember, but things like that. I would not put it in the same bucket as your classical
I
RPG.
think at least they need to have a name.
Yeah.
If your troops don't even have a name, like, is it really an RPG? Like,
I mean, the commanders are your true RPGs, but they can't kiss, so it's not an RPG.
Exactly. Exactly. When did the
Voth
tanks
the Raven
kiss?
says, with sports games, I think we're getting into where do you draw the line between simulation and RPG discourse. Here's what I would say about that. Captain Tsubasa is an RPG. It's a freaking tactics RPG with a sports layer. It's told like a manga. Captain Tsubasa is an RPG. And
is
there
The
are-
Sims an RPG?
The
Sorry?
Sims and RPG.
Is The
Ooh.
Sims an
Sims.
RPG?
It could be. You build up your characters, you name them, you kill them in swimming pools by taking away the ladder.
They have skills on how good they are at work.
I
They
mean,
level up
kinda.
in their jobs.
You come out with your own careers and stuff.
Do we consider, like, I feel like a fundamental part of this is that you're supposed to, like RPG characters are not supposed to be disposable in the way that like Sims are ethereal. Sims are intended to be ethereal.
Have you ever played tabletop RPGs?
I know.
They die so much.
Well, I'm saying
Rocks fall, you die.
I'm saying like death is an impactful moment in an RPG, whereas death is an expectation in Sims. Like
How do you play The Sims?
when you rip this. Oh, I could tell stories about
Dude, my Sims never die.
my
I make them
sister.
immortal. I can't kill them.
My sister. There's a thread out there on Twitter that I detailed this, but I would watch my sister play The Sims, and she would routinely have her character marry men who were rich and then murder them for money to build up more of her house. It's a fantastic time. It's really good.
See, we're really okay. I wanted to finish my point about sports games. A game like FIFA or Madden also has a franchise mode, which is a high-level management sim. So actually, a lot of these games like FIFA are Frankenstein's monsters of RPG modes, and then management sim modes, and then straight-up arcade games and stuff like that. So that's what I would say about that. We're really into shit now. Abekin says, except there's a long history of Warhammer RPGs, just like how D&D derived from chainmail. I'm glad that we had a chainmail reference in this RPG. What is it? The RPG discourse is not complete without a chainmail reference. And actually, I'm a hardcore history listener. And at one point, there's an episode. The host, Dan Carlin, is actually an old school wargamer player, and he actually talks about playing games like chainmail and whatnot, like old school. And it's I don't know where the exact episode is. It might be Hardcore History Addendum. Go check it out. His perspective is on that particular era is pretty interesting in my mind. We're almost out of time for this particular segment. We've been going for a while now, but I'm gonna open a little can of worms right now. Zelda RPG?
It depends on the Zelda, I think.
Depends on
It
the Zelda.
depends on the
That's an interesting
Zelda.
take.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really consider A Link to the Past
No.
there's really nothing that you do. You level up your armor, you level up your sword, but other than that, it's very, very much more action based than, say, Secret of Mana, if you want to make a direct comparison, where that is less about like, mashing the button, more about strategically doing your attacks, using your magic, managing a party. It had, of course, building up your stats, building up your weapons. It had definitely more numbers go up than A Link to the Past, although they played almost similarly.
I think Breath of the Wild is the closest that Zelda has come to being an RPG, and that's just
very simple stats, very basic numbers.
But I don't think it's about the ways they interact. It's about the way that if you are in a cold zone, you can freeze to death, but you can put on your warm clothing to deal with that. Or you can eat food that will give you resistance, or you can like I was watching a friend who has just started playing, shouts to Cam Hawkins, has just started playing Breath Wild, and he came up to a tower that was covered in ice, and he was like, how do I deal with this? And I just told him, figure it out. And eventually he figured out how to use fire to melt the ice, and there's so many different ways you can get fire and how that puzzle can be solved. And that to me is extremely RPG. That feeling of, here's a problem, how do you, the way you build your character, the way you've handled your character, the way you approach things, how do you deal with this? Yeah, I like this Vote the Raven. Breath of the Wild is an immersive sim. Now that's a take I can get on board with. Yeah.
Oh no.
I mean, yeah, honestly, like I think it's an interesting game because of that. I think we're all interested by it because of that, and so I would put it in the market.
Personally, like, I'm okay with calling it an RPG, and I'm going to go even back. Before Zelda, you had Xanadu, you had Highlight, and you have Druaga's Tower, which I think is one of the most important games in Japanese history to understand their logic behind designing puzzles and designing like level up and systems. The whole idea of like, you do something absurd like, oh, if you kill 3 ghosts on this level, you get a pickaxe that then you can use on level 12 to open this door, is like completely this idea of how they handle puzzles in a very different way from Western RPGs, because this is something I actually once asked one of the developers from Experience Inc. which they do a bunch of like wizardry clones, but they never copied wizardry puzzles. They don't do riddles. They don't do that kind of like even sometimes like sliding puzzles and that kind of like Western approach to puzzle solving.
Yeah.
They do the Tower of Druaga one. You know, do this arbitrary, really weird thing, and then you get an item that will open another thing. And I think like it maybe not Zelda might not be an RPG if you're coming from the Western tradition, but if you're coming from the Japanese tradition, 100% it is.
That's a good point. I never even thought about that. The Tower of Jiraga. If you want to know more about Tower of Jiraga, dear God, Jeremy Parrish has covered like every inch of that game practically. So go ahead and listen to that. But you're right. Like that is like one of the basic like primordial origins of certain RPGs, and it's like, wow, you opened my mind. Thank you.
Well then, Criminal Justice said what we've learned in episode 400 is we still don't know what an RPG is. There's still so much to.
It is a role-playing game.
Apparently,
There
we've
you
learned
go.
that Zelda is an RPG. Final thoughts before we wrap this segment up. We'll start with you, Eric.
I think RPGs are the friends we made along the way, personally. But it's, yeah, I mean, it's.
I just think they're neat.
I think RPGs are just it's such a cool thing, and I think especially in the last few years we've seen so much evolution and like looking into what this like we've seen developers actively interrogate what an RPG is and how they can push it and evolve it, and especially as the genre itself kind of fractures because of the ways that it's been adopted by the mainstream. We're seeing a lot of RPG developers, I think, try to get back to some roots of what it is. Shoutouts to Dungeon Encounters, baby. That's the best. I love it. And I love it. I think it's fantastic. So yeah, there's not really a strict definition of an RPG, but that's what makes RPGs interesting to me and why I'd rather spend 400 episodes podcasting about them versus most other genres out there.
True.
How about you, Nadia?
I think Felipe was onto something when he said it's a vibe. It really is. It's always been a vibe for me as a kid. Like we were just talking about Zelda. I mean, Zelda 2 qualifies as an RPG in many ways, but does it matter? Does it really matter at the end? Like Eric said, it's the friends we made along the way. It's a vibe. It's a good feeling. It's just, like coming home, I guess. And now that games are more cross-pollinated than ever and are just so available, and there's so many resources to put, basically creators can put their souls into games practically these days. It's just, it's a vibe. I'm good. Pass the Dutchie on the left hand side. We're all good here.
The Gen Z, it always goes back to vibes with Gen Z.
I'm not Gen Z.
Felipe, what are your thoughts?
My thoughts are like the same thoughts that I had as a teenager with metal music and stuff like this. That is like, don't be that guy that is like, oh, this is not true metal. I am not going to listen to this. Explore all the things, because you're the artist. Like, one of the things that really opened my mind. Let me tell you a funny story. I love progressive rock. The way I found out about progressive rock was because Nightwish made a cover of High Hopes in one of their albums. I have never heard Pink Floyd before in my life. And this mesh of like influences, I think, is one of the best things that like a developer, a music, an artist, a writer does, when you pull your influences and you basically like you're inviting your audience into this little world of the things that you like.
Yeah.
All the things, like from Doom, putting that really, like you play Doom, you know what those guys love, that kind of like metal rock song and everything. From RPGs, you should embark on their journey. Like if you're playing an RPG where the guy really loves Tower of Druaga and you're thinking like, this is really cool, then go try Tower of Druaga. Like, don't be like, I only play RPGs, I only play like Western RPGs, Japanese RPGs, whatever. Like, go explore.
I think that is a really good sentiment. Or as Zero Alex says, be descriptive, not prescriptive, which is good. On the flip side, one of the reasons I keep going back to this conversation, I think, is to be able to articulate what an RPG is, or be able to discuss RPGs in depth, is to understand the genre better. And to me, understanding RPGs is to understand video games, because it is one of those bedrock genres that have influenced so much And so to understand RPGs, I think that this is like the thesis of this show. I think to understand RPGs is to understand video games, all video games across the board. But at the same time, I agree. Be descriptive, not prescriptive. And that was an awesome discussion. Thank you so much. And now it's time for the Pantheon of the Blood God revisit. And we have a game that I'm glad we're talking about with Felipe here. Shadowrun Dragonfall, which we explored. Very interesting episode. I think that it tends to get overlooked in Pantheon discussions because we have such a console RPG fandom in our Discord. But no doubt is A, very good, and B, pretty important because it's one of the first examples of a crowdsourced RPG or a crowdsourced game. It was, I believe, it was one of the first games to get kickstarted back in the day. Was the return of Shadowrun, and of course, Shadowrun, as we know, is a extremely important RPG series that reaches into the tabletop realm. And what I'm curious about is, Felipe, Shadowrun Dragonfall. Is this a Pantheon level RPG? When I say Pantheon level, if you're joining us for the first time, usually we think of it as an RPG that still holds up, is important in some way, and has something special about it, that special greatness to it. Can you tell the story of RPGs without Shadowrun Dragonfall?
I think you can tell the story of without that game because it is a great game. It is a fantastic game if you love that genre of games, that special genre of RPGs. It is a really good one. Like it's basically like going on the vibes of more isometric games, like let's say Fallout, Under Rail. This kind of like old school turn-based cyberpunk RPGs are rare, but I don't think it is the best example of that. Like, I think, let's say, if you're looking to that kind of games, you might be more interested into playing, let's say, the Pillars of Eternity in turn-based mode or the Pathfinder games. Not that that game is bad. It is not. It is a really good. How to say, like a cyberpunk, one of the best cyberpunk games, RPGs, but I don't think it is on that level that is going to change someone's mind if you don't like that genre already.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sums up my thoughts on that too. Is that like I think Shadowrun Returns, the entire trilogy, is very good, and Cyberpunk is a really cool setting specifically. But I feel like it's a setting that has not always been best served by the genre of role playing, and we're still trying to figure out like we're trying to make the Baldur's Gate of it, you know.
The best Shadowrun game was I don't know, Dishonored, Dragon, Metal Gear Solid. It's a stealth. No, I kid. But it's always been a heist game, right? Get the party together, go in and try to steal the thing using technology and magic and all sorts of interesting things. And weirdly enough, Shadowrun games have rarely captured that feeling. Shadowrun Dragonfall maybe came the closest, I think. But
yeah, but
very
I
good
think
game
it's still,
overall. Great story.
yeah, but I think it gets still stuck on being too much drawing from the BioWare influence. It doesn't stand on its own without thinking like, oh, this is like if you like games like BioWare games, and in that case, I think you should first play the BioWare games. You know.
Just go play BioWare.
But I mean, they ruled the RPG scene for a decade for a reason, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
I was for sure recommend you first playing Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 first before going into Shadowrun Dragonfall, and like of course Mass Effect as well. But I think Dragonfall is going more for that a bit older vibe.
Well, Shadowrun Dragonfall apparently still not Pantheon worthy. We will make a final decision when we do our Pantheon of the Blood God revisit next month. And we should really bring Felipe on because I think that we need that historical perspective for this
Mm-hmm.
episode. So I look forward to it. Please look forward to it.
I always look forward to it.
Nadia, take us home.
Okay, Kat, you were here earlier than all of us for a sound check that didn't really happen until 10 minutes before showtime. But I think you were mad because you're like, where is everybody? And you texted me just the word Nadia, which sounded like my mom when she's mad at me, like, Nadia. And that triggered a memory in me. Actually, when I mentioned it before, I was 14, 15. I had major jaw surgery. Basically had my jaw broken, reset, because I had a terrible overbite that couldn't be fixed otherwise. And something went wrong with the anesthetic. I don't think it was anything like life-threatening, but it wasn't good. And they had to kind of adjust things on the fly. So I woke up very sick. I can't describe the feeling when I woke up. It was actually the worst I've ever felt in my life. Like, I felt like I was dying, and I just did not want to wait. I felt like I was far, far down. I didn't want to wake up because I just didn't care. Something in me was broken. So they're trying to wake me up. I could hear the nurses like trying to wake me up, saying, Nadia, wake up, and I wouldn't do it. And then my mom just leans over me and says, Nadia, like that really angry way that you texted it. And
wake up, Nadia.
Not even, no, not like, oh, wake up, sweetie. It's like, Nadia. And it's like, holy shit. Like the voice that she would use if like I was set to go to school in 20 minutes and I hadn't even gotten out of bed, like that was exactly the voice that it was. And it worked. I didn't just wake up, I popped awake. Like, whoop, like someone turned a switch and the nurses were just amazed. But yeah, that was my first and only time in the ICU. And if you want to have a good time, try throwing up with your jaw wired shut. It's really great. You should try it. I recommend it. 10 out of 10. Yeah.
Heavy as the moon. Love that we don't even call it a nook anymore.
I didn't even notice.
All pretense is gone now.
And if you keep going, Nadia, it's just going to drive you right into the pit. It's like, oh no, I'm dragging you down here.
There is a relevant article I wrote, actually. It's still preserved on VG 24/7, where I talk about that's the time I played Final Fantasy IV for the first time. And it was a very rough summer for me because post-op depression is a very real thing. They didn't talk about it much when I was having my surgery, but like you will get depressed after surgery. You will get bad feelings, which are fine. They're totally normal, but you need to take care of yourself. So I was playing Final Fantasy IV for that reason, and it kind of goes hand in hand. Look up the article. It was a really popular one of mine for some reason.
I remember, this is a little bit of Axe of the Blood God nostalgia. When you first came on the show, you were like, no, I've never played a Persona game.
Yeah.
I was like, you gotta play Persona, Nadia. Gotta play Persona. Play Persona 4 Golden. Seriously. I was investigating ways to get you a PlayStation Vita television so that you could play it on your TV. I was like, well, she was like, I don't have a Vita. I'm like, I'm gonna buy you a Vita and then ship it to Canada. And I was like, oh my god, shipping to Canada is really expensive, actually. Holy cow! But you got a Vita.
Yes.
You got Persona 4 Golden, and you played it. And I think you were in the hospital at that time, so you were playing a lot of. So you had a lot of downtime to be able to play Persona 4, if I recall.
Yeah,
correctly. It was one of our earliest segments. What was it called? The Persona 4 quest or something like that.
Persona 4 report.
The Persona 4 report. We even had a jingle.
We did, yeah.
Persona.
That was fun. That was actually, that was a different surgery. That was 2016. I just started with US Gamer. And it was actually a pretty big one. I had to get my belly cut open and all this other cool stuff. So I was in the hospital for 3 days after that. And I played a lot of Persona after when I came home. But to the hospital, I brought my Nintendo DS and I was playing Pokemon Sun and Moon, which is one of the reasons I really love that game. And that was also, I've told this before, but it was still the weirdest thing that ever happened to me. That was when I was playing, and I thought I was lucid. I thought I was like, hey, I'm awake. I'm going to play Nintendo 3DS. And the characters kept saying the word grated cheese over and over and over. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to go to sleep. And so I went back to sleep. And yeah, that was the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me. And I swear to God it happened. Just Team Skull saying grated cheese, grated cheese, grated cheese.
You lived a Nintendo creepypasta. Like, this is just, God.
Well, there's a lot of morphine in my veins. I mean, they gave me one of those buttons. And then they checked up on me and said, whoa. It took away the buttons. And I only had oral pills from then on.
The Persona 4 report was fun. We should
It was. I enjoyed it.
maybe if we did a Persona 5 report, I would actually
How's
finally
that
play
Persona
through it.
3 report going, Kat?
Cough, cough. Yeah, buddy. that thread is still going, by the way. The Persona 3 day by day.
Oh, good for you guys. We have a
Yeah.
great community.
they've
Last I
Y'all are
they've
real
soldiered
players.
on.
I have an incredible community. I have to say, if I had stuck with it diligently, I think I would just be finishing it now. Because
It's just so much going on.
P3 Portable goes up till like May thereabouts. I can't remember. Anyway, I went to the British Virgin Islands, and that completely wrecked any chance of me being able to play because I explicitly did not bring any video game stuff with me, and so I ended up being like a month behind in game. And it was like, and then I got busy, and I think I was playing Elden Ring, and that was the
end of Persona 3.
Truly. Nadia was mentioning that we have an amazing community, and it's true. We're seeing it right now. We had such a wonderful crowd for the Axe of the Blood God 400 live stream. It's been really wonderful to watch this show grow from the days where I started it and I was finding whatever guests I could find, and then I brought Nadia on board and the show went up another level, and then I brought Eric on board and the show went up another level again, and doing the live streams with the Stars of Destiny and the specials, the Pantheon. I remember when US Gamer shut down in 2020 and thinking, wow, like this is the end of an era, this is terrible, where's the show going to go from here? I had to basically go to US Gamer and be like, hey, we're going to do a podcast one way or another, but like we'd really like the name. Can we keep the name and the archives and everything? And they said yes.
That was really good of them. Yeah.
Very kind of them. They could have been really shitty because so some companies are pretty jealous about that kind of thing, but I'll say this much. They were good on that front. So, and so Axe of the Blood God has soldiered on. I mean, we're in year 3 of the Patreon.
That's
patreon.com/bloodgodpod. Pretty incredible, amazing, and we have a wonderful community, incredible community. I grew up hanging out in chat rooms, like that was my thing, IRC mostly. That was where I found my community. So I'm very at home in this environment, and I try to create that in our Discord, and we have such a wonderful, wholesome, welcoming community, and it's been an absolute delight to interact with you and chat and be nerdy about RPGs. I want to say thanks to our excellent mods, exclusively Lex and Brian C. Nerd and Alexia. You're doing a great job. Thank you so much for your time. It's great. It's a great show, and I think we're going to onward to episode 500. Oh my god.
Yeah, let's do this. No, first stop is episode 420. You gotta remember
420. We should just waited for 420 to be able to do that.
We could have done this whole thing just really high. What's an RPG? I don't know, man. What's anything?
Amazing. And that is the end of Axe of the Blood God 400. Thank you so much for listening. But wait, that's not it if you're here on the live show, because we're going to go do the post show right after that. This Blood God After Dark. I'll be another 30 minutes. And that is the episode that is typically available on the feed for our Stars of Destiny, so they can look forward to that. And you can sign up if you want to do this every single week at patreon.com/bloodgodpod. We also have a shop now, axeofthebloodgod.shop.fourthwall.com, and when you put little dashes between the Axe of the Blood God and shop in order to access it. I'm working on changing the URL to shop.bloodgodpod.com and getting it connected to the website, which I promise I'm going to update soon. We're doing a lot of other things behind the scenes as well. We have big plans for the podcast. In the meantime, I've been your host, Kat Bailey. You can follow me on Twitter at @the_Catbot. Nadia is at Nadia Oxford. Eric is at CMusi. And Felipe, one more time, where can we find you and what projects are you working on?
Yeah, I'm finishing the updated version of the cRPG book. It's going to get published by Bitmap Books again in August of this year. we added like over 150 pages talking about French, Korean, and Chinese RPGs, online RPGs, MMOs, MUDs. Is like a really nice
Oh,
expansion.
mods.
And people can find me at Twitter at Felipe Pepe, everything together. And yeah, thank you so much for inviting me, and
No,
thank for the
absolutely.
audience to listening to my rambling and my really thick accent.
No, it was
That
great.
was wonderful.
Yeah.
It was awesome. There's some questions about when we're going to do the coupon. As soon as this is done, I'm going to literally go and set up that promo code so that we can have that over on there. I need to do one extra thing, then we'll do it. In the meantime, we'll be back next week, as always, to talk about the genre we love. But for Eric, Nadia, Felipe, and myself, thanks so much for listening, and happy adventuring. Welcome to the Axe of the Blood God post show. I'm still your host, Kat Bailey. Joining me is Eric Van Allen, Nadia Oxford, and Felipe Pepe. And we are the light is on. It's Blood God After Dark. This is the episode in which we talk. We just hang out. We gab. We talk about whatever.
Just all comes
RPGs,
out.
Things that are of interest to us. I'm literally about to go get my wallet so that I can put up this discount
Get your wallet, hold up your
on our
credit card
shop.
number. Hey, everybody.
We were just talking about what is an RPG. We could probably delve into that discourse more, but Felipe, I'm curious, how long have you been in Japan? Please tell us about your Japan experience and how you ended up there.
Oh, I've been here for 6 years, almost 6 years and a half now. And the whole thing was like, I have a friend who came to Japan about 10 years ago using the Monbu Kagakusho, which is the scholarship from the Japanese government. And they have this special scholarship if you want to do like a master's degree or even a graduation here in Japan. And she's an engineer. She came here to do her master's. And since then, she's been living here. She actually worked then at Square Enix, and now she works at NVIDIA here.
Nice.
And I came to visit her was 12 years ago. I came to visit her, and I was like, oh, wow, this is like amazing. Like, I want to live here too. And a lot of things happened in Brazil, like political stuff, economical stuff. It's a really interesting country to follow the economics and the things going on. You're never bored. It's like
Life is
amazing.
interesting.
No, the same time that House of Cards was going on TV, we were having a political coup. So we were like, House of Cards is so boring. It's like so predictable, you know. You watch the news, is so much more exciting and full of like plot twists and stuff like this. But then I applied also for the scholarship. I didn't get it 3 times in a row.
Oh.
But I eventually saved enough money for me to come as a student to study Japanese. I found a job here later. I work in marketing, and I've been here since, like with a work visa.
Wow.
Wow.
That's really cool.
So you've been in Japan for about a decade then?
No, I've been for my friend has been for 12 years now. I've been for almost 7 years now.
7 years. Wow.
I guess you're fluent in Japanese?
Kind of like when you live in Japan, you realize there's no fluency. Because everyone is fluent until you have to do a phone call or until you have to do a rental contract, which is like,
I've heard
because
these
like
stories.
they have the Japanese levels and stuff like this. And when I got my rental contract, I invited a Japanese friend to come with me to the office to sign the contract so she could help me with the difficult words. And she was looking at the contract like, can you explain to me what is this? Like asking because the whole thing about kanji is that if you don't practice, like you don't have even the root of the word. It's like a little drawing. If you haven't seen the drawing in 20 years, you don't know what it means. So
I've heard
it's
that.
a
I've heard
really
kanji the
difficult
hardest part.
language.
Yeah.
When I first moved there, one of the first things we had to do was get phones. And that entailed going to one of the major electronic shops, think like Yodobashi Camera or something, and sitting down and they hand you a contract.
Yes.
It's all in Japanese.
Nice.
They don't have any English on this thing, and you have to be able to suss out the kanji to be like, okay, this is the kanji for name, this is the kanji for address, and they're very strict about the way that you put your name in and everything. The thing that was the hardest was putting in your birthday, because you don't put in, the Roman calendar, you put in the Japanese calendar.
Oh, really?
I was born in the
Yes.
Showa era.
Oh my
I don't
God.
remember the number.
Yeah, I'm 62, which is 1987.
Okay, so it's like 50 something for me. I didn't have, and this was pre-smartphone. So anyway, I was in Japan. I was getting a phone anyway. I didn't have access to the internet. I had to figure out what my birthday was.
That's amazing.
In
I love
the Japanese calendar without the help of Google or a smartphone, so that I could get a damn phone and the internet. So it's like those little moments. Also, you spend a lot of time in residency offices because you're getting your visas and everything. You have to get your foreign national card. And also, they're very strict about the paperwork there as well. It's a challenge. So you're bringing back some memories there when you're talking
Some
about
traumas,
it.
right?
Some trauma.
Some old trauma for sure. Eric, please hold down the fort. I'll be right back.
Yeah. No, so this is all fascinating to me because I've been someone who this year I finally determined myself to. I've said I'm going to do Duolingo and pick up some workbooks and finally learn Japanese because I would like to go to Japan someday. I really would. And so it's fascinating to hear about all the different. So I don't think I want to move there. That's the difference. Is I want to visit. Moving is different.
I don't know if I'd be a good fit for Japan. I absolutely love visiting it, but I am too much of a chaos goblin to really fit into. When I went to Japan, I felt like I walked through the huge tunnel in Shinjuku Station just for something to do, and just watching all these people kind of watching me. And I'm like, I feel like I'm in Toronto, except there's a whole set of rules that I do not understand, and also mascots have taken over the government.
I like I've talked before about this a little bit in some of the After Darks and all that, but I have learned as I've been in kind of this place of, Texas ain't getting any better, so maybe I need to start looking at other places to live. And so I've been investigating different areas, and I've learned I'm not a city person, but I am a rural person. And so like if and when I do visit Japan, I do kind of want to go see like the rural areas, like
I would love to go to Kyoto.
Yeah, like see some of the countryside, see some of like the the places that are further out. As much as Tokyo would be fun, all the big lights and all that. I really like this is a very like pandemic statement, but like I got really into travel videos around that time where it was just like, here's someone walking through Japan with like a GoPro on and they're just like vibing in different places, and especially the rural ones. I was like, oh, this is so nice. This is so chill.
I want to make a proposal to my brother who is a snowboarder, and he really wants to go to Hokkaido. And I said, like, I would split costs with you, and I want to go to Hokkaido. I want to see the nature there. I don't care about snowboarding, but yeah, I'd love to go.
Yeah, I went to Hokkaido on February now because for the snow festival.
Oh, yeah.
It's the first time they're doing it after the COVID.
Oh, cool.
And about the thing about Japan countryside, like for me, it's a bit the exact opposite because I grew up in the countryside in Brazil. Like until I was 17, I was living in a farm. And for me to get to the city was like half an hour car ride. So I grew up with like my brother swimming in the lake, riding horses and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, sweet. I'm jealous.
And somehow playing Baldur's Gate because whatever. But for me, it's the opposite. I really love Tokyo and all the convenience here. I love that, let's say, right now it's like super early. I can go to a conveni, buy whatever I want. I can hop on a train and go wherever I want because it's the complete opposite of my life and my childhood before. And I like going to the countryside in Japan. As you said, like it's beautiful for you to do a hike or something like this. If I stay more than one day, I'm already like screaming like, there is nothing to do. Like what is going on in here? Yeah, like a few months ago, me and our friends, we took a car and we did like a car trip across Chiba,
Hmm.
which is like right next to, it's like the peninsula right next to Tokyo,
Yeah.
and like it's full of beaches and it has like a lot of really cute rice fields.
Hmm.
But after like 3 hours riding, we were like, what the fuck is going on here? Like there is nothing. Like we were like, we want a combini. Where is my combini, my convenience store? Like
It's
we
like
need to
driving
like.
on a road trip
Yeah.
through the United States. It's just like, wow, these are really cool mountains. Okay, I'm done with mountains. Can we
It,
get out of here?
it's like you go to New York and you have like bodegas open all the time, but then you go to like, God, was it
Yes.
when I was in Atlanta, it was like, oh, it's like package stores and they're only open until like 9 p.m. and have weird laws about what days they can sell certain things and stuff like that. And it is a completely different type of thing. It's a different kind of life.
I live in a household of 4, and one of my housemates wants to buy a house in the countryside so that she can raise animals
I
and
do that.
garden and live a sustainable life, I suppose.
Mm.
And I am very much there's a part of me that calls out to me, a part of me, certainly, because I think it's so beautiful when I'm in a rural area and it's really dark, and
Yeah.
and maybe I see the one light in the distance, and I can imagine. I find comfort in solitude a lot of the time. Having said that, I love living in the city, and Tokyo was the first truly big city that I lived in, a true
Mm.
world city,
Yeah.
and it affected me, and I still think about that a lot, actually, being the huge crowds crossing the scramble crossing, coming home from work on the train, that kind of thing. How every neighborhood was its own self-contained unit and all of that. And I think cities are beautiful, and Tokyo is one of the most beautiful cities. So I'm kind of with you, Felipe, is what I'm saying.
I like a blend of the two. That's why I like Toronto so much. There's a lot of greenery here, a lot of ravines, a lot of parks. But I think it's important to spend time in nature and to spend time with people in equal parts. I feel like one thing we are forgetting is you have to learn how to put up with other people. It's a very human trait that we have to get over. We can't always be around our monkey sphere, to
Mm-mm.
borrow a term from Cracked way
Monkey
back when.
sphere.
Monkey sphere. You can't always be with your family unit who you love very much and you're always comfortable with. You have to ride the transit. You have to get to know annoying people. You have to realize I'm annoying too. I'm a stupid monkey like everyone else. It kind of puts you in your place. I think a lot of people have forgotten that because the more you can avoid other people, the richer you are usually, and that tends to kind of erode your humanity, I think.
Yeah,
Just a
Yeah,
thought.
but
I was just gonna
no,
say, I
please.
think I like that idea of like living somewhere where you can do a little bit of both, and that's why I've always liked Austin specifically. Is it's easy for me to go into the city or go into nature whenever I want.
I live in Alameda. It's an
Yes, you do.
island that has a little bit of a small town vibe. I can walk around. It's quite beautiful. There's an emphasis on locally owned business, and there's an
Mm.
emphasis on community that I find really appealing. However, I can also get on a bus or a train or a ferry and go across the bay, and the next thing you know, I'm in San Francisco. And if I want to go hiking, I can get in my car, and like 20 minutes later, I'll be in the Oakland Hills, which is some of the most beautiful nature I've ever seen. Or I can drive down the California coast and just be blown away by awe-inspiring views. Um, I actually feel quite lucky to live where I live because I think it's one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah, I feel basically the same because where I live in Tokyo, I live very far up north in Tokyo,
Mm.
and on my train line, it takes like let's say 40 minutes for me to reach Shibuya and be like in the heart of Tokyo. But also, if I go on the other direction, I changed, go out of Tokyo, and I reach an area where there's like I can go hiking, swim on lakes and stuff like
I
this.
love
Like
swimming.
the exact same train line is like absolutely amazing because before moving to Tokyo, I live in Sao Paulo, which is
Mm.
like Tokyo has like 40 million people. Sao Paulo has 20 million people. So it's also like a monstrous city,
Enormous. Yeah.
but it's an enormous South American city, which is a very different vibe than Tokyo. Like it is. let's say, is like changing from, let's say, a simulation game to a survival game. It's,
Get
and
your knife.
yeah, it's very different adventures, but they have the same thing about everything is available at any time. But after a while, I just really like how everything works exactly the way it should be in Tokyo.
It does.
After I spent years of my life going to like a bus stop and like, is the bus going to come? I don't know. Maybe. Will I be able to board it? Who knows? Like,
Who knows? Maybe it's a
yeah,
mystery.
maybe. Like, that's right. Like, worst case scenario, just walk for 1 hour. Like, no big deal. So
Supposed
it's
to
nice to have
Tokyo.
that kind of like
Yeah,
trust
the
on the
bus, will, the
system.
bus will come and it will look like
Certainty.
this.
Yeah, most of the time the trains are precisely on time, except for certain moments that everybody knows about. In which case, you get a little permission slip from the train station that you bring into the office to say, "Yeah, this happened again. Sorry." But
Oh, really? Cool.
oh yeah, it happened many times, and to talk about it is to get into dark territory. But
Damn, that sounds evil train stories. You gotta
evil train story.
fill me in one day, Kat. I want to hear
Evil
about this.
train stories.
I love
We'll
that
talk
that's
about it
where
at
you
PAX.
go.
Putting a pin on this.
Wow, evil trains.
Train stories
So is it a
light
ghost
party.
train? Is it a ghost
Can we
train?
suplex it?
Can you suplex it? Amazing. Suplex that train. The Oscars are this weekend. I ask, is anybody paying attention, and who you got?
Absolutely not.
So, is Everything Everywhere All at Once, is that in contention?
It is.
It should win every award. That movie is one
I
of the
agree.
best movies I've seen
I
in
haven't
years.
seen it yet. I've heard it's great,
so
though.
good.
Nadia, it's not just one of my favorite movies. I really do think it's one of the best movies I've ever watched.
What is
Yeah,
it comparable to?
Oh,
I
jeez.
don't know. It's kind of it's a gonzo martial arts movie.
Okay,
Yeah.
And
so I can
it's
deal with that.
filled, and it hits a lot of different angles. It's a story of generations. It's a story of generational trauma and family trauma. It's a story of immigration, like an immigrant family story. All of the characters have their own battles to fight and their own demons to face, but it's all done in the context of a wildly creative, absurdist martial arts movie that in some ways and first rate performances. So
Definitely
good.
gonna see it.
Michelle Yeoh kills it.
Absolutely amazing. Yeah.
The core characters in that movie all absolutely kill it, and it should probably sweep all the awards. For the love of God, please don't let Top Gun Maverick beat it. That's the only thing that I ask.
No, there is no even possibility. The Oscars would soon they'd give it to something like, I don't know, Tar or whatever, like one of the more filmy films, than they'd ever give it to Top Gun Maverick. Come on now.
I am old enough to remember when American Beauty got Best Picture. Dear God, can you imagine that in this day and age? Did any of you see American Beauty?
I'm familiar
Yes.
with it. I haven't seen it
It's
though.
so bad. I saw it in the theaters. Why did I see it? I've been thinking about like all the movies I saw in theaters back in the day when I was a kid. And I was like, why? Did we have nothing better to do? Could we not find some drugs to smoke instead of wasting money on Sabrina just because Harrison Ford was in it?
What's the worst movie y'all have ever gone to see in the theaters?
Batman and Robin. I saw it on opening day. They gave us boxes of corn pops for some reason. We were throwing it at cars. Good times.
For me, it was probably
Scary
the last Jurassic Park one.
Oh, I saw that and I said, nope, I'm not even touching it. It looks so stupid.
I mean, honestly, Rise of Skywalker,
Yeah,
That was pretty bad.
that was
Oh
pretty
yeah,
bad.
that was bad. Yeah.
one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I would say, I've said that Rise of Skywalker is probably the worst movie of my lifetime because it's a movie that's so transcendently bad that it managed to piss off both the Last Jedi stans and the Last Jedi haters.
It was pretty
And
good in that regard.
it almost single-handedly set back Star Wars permanently.
Yeah, yeah.
It was such a incredible disaster. But the other answer is Scary Movie. I saw that movie in theaters for some reason.
I can see you being
Oh.
baffled by that stupid thing.
Scary
I had
movie
not
is.
seen the original Scream, so I did not have any context for
Oh, that'll
it.
do it.
Yeah. Okay.
And when I came out of that movie, my main reaction was ew.
Yeah, that's about right. I I have two answers. I once saw a movie called Who's Your Caddy, which was absolutely just
Oh, shit.
terrible. It was
Yeah, I
a
think I know that
knockoff
one.
Caddyshack, and it was super
Yeah.
bad. We were the only people in the theater. It was wild.
That's always the best.
It was just not a good movie. But the one that I fondly remember as being a terrible movie was we saw Transformers 2 at midnight.
Oh, that was
And-
such a terrible movie.
Here's the thing. We saw it, and literally at least half of my high school at the time, because that's when it came out, it was going to see it, because Transformers was
Yeah.
huge at the time. It was
My coworkers were in my theater. Like,
It-
we didn't
it
even plan it. They
yeah,
was there.
it was like what the MCU is now. I would say is like the scale that those Transformers movies had
absolutely.
gotten to. And so like half at least of my high school was at that theater seeing it at midnight, and we all just kind of agreed, I think, about 10 minutes in that this movie was terrible. And to hear an entire theater just rip on a movie for an hour and a half, it was incredible. It was so good. So honestly, I can't say it's Transformers. Rise of Skywalker is up there too. I remember walking out of that and being like, I don't think I've walked out of a movie mad before, but that was the closest I've gotten to it, where I was like, why did they even make this?
There was a tweet I did as soon as I walked out of that theater where I ranked all the Star Wars movies and instantly put Rise of Skywalker at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And Mike was like, no, it's not that bad. And I'm like, it's that bad. And he's like, it's not worse than Attack of the Clones. I'm like, yes, it is. I would watch Attack
I would
of the
rather
Clones
watch
again.
Attack
I
of the
have
Clones right now.
literally
I think so. Even to make fun of
no
it.
interest in ever watching Rise of Skywalker ever again. And my feelings on that movie have only grown stronger at the time. Another movie that I have PTSD about is Star Trek Into Darkness,
Oh, I saw
which
that.
I
movie.
was reasonably excited about at the time because I actually really enjoyed the original 2009 Abrams reboot.
So did I, to be honest.
And I still think it's a fine Star Trek movie, all in all. A little actiony, but whatever. I can do that. But I saw that movie twice. I enjoyed it so much. And I saw it on the IMAX and it ruled. And then, so Into Darkness comes out and is one of the 2 times that I've ever guffawed out loud in a movie theater derisively. And specifically, it's the moment where Spock does the con meme.
Yeah.
That
That was so bad. Why did they do that?
I was like, no.
Even my dad was like, why is Khan a white guy? What is going on here?
Wait, wasn't
It somehow made it worse.
Khan
because
is
originally
Benedict
Khan was
Cumberbatch,
an
right?
Indian guy played by a Cuban guy.
Mm.
And they're
Oh my
like,
God.
what if
They
we
made
get
it
a
worse.
pasty ass English dude to play
get
Khan this time?
Benedict
This is
Cumberbatch in
scorched
here?
earth.
Get him involved.
God, I hate it. I just do not like Benedict Cumberbatch. I do not like go around saying I hate this author, I hate this actor, but I do not like him. He terrible as Smaug.
I think the thing, I was telling someone about this recently, there are varying levels of British people doing American accents. I think some do very good American ones. Hugh Laurie from House comes to mind. I do not like Benedict Cumberbatch's fake American accent at all. It just sounds
so bad.
It's so monotone. He's like, hello, Iron Man, and it's just like very like
Hello.
monotone and singular, and I've just never liked it. It's always sounded weird to me, and yeah.
And Marvel keeps like pumping up Doctor Strange as one of the biggest Avengers, and it's like, oh no.
Yeah, they don't stop with that.
The best Doctor Strange thing happens in the What If Disney Plus show. That's the best piece of Doctor Strange fiction that the MCU's turned out, and it's like tucked away, and then they reference it in the new movie. They like bring it back
Oh,
for the
really?
new movie. Yeah, but like that stuff is really good. What If is really, really good. That's one of
I've heard
Is
that.
it?
I've heard it's really good.
I've heard people say that it's not good.
Oh, I loved it.
At least
I heard the opposite.
my colleagues, the opinions of my colleagues is that it's not good.
Well, I'll fight your colleagues in the Denny's parking lot, because What If is pretty darn good. I really liked all their takes on it, and the way it ties it all together at the end is really cool too.
Speaking of fighting, maybe not in Denny's parking lots, the film Creed 3, which exclusively Lex said that they're going to go see.
Oh, I
I
need
had
to
no
see
intention
that.
of going to see it. I didn't care about the original. I didn't care for the original Creed. I
Really?
like the Rocky movies, all right, because I'm a sucker for a good sports movie.
But you didn't like
Creed
Creed
3,
1?
real good, y'all. It's a good movie. Like, really well done. Uh, I think Lex was mentioning its anime influences. Michael B. Jordan directed this thing, and
Oh, there you are.
uh, he was explicitly influenced by shonen anime.
Yeah, like the Naruto and
Good for him.
Sasuke fight and all that. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? It's done well. It works. And Jonathan Majors totally steals the show, as he has been a lot recently. Even if you don't like a boxing movie, there's a lot of very manly men crying, a lot of manly tears
That's
in this
so
movie.
shonen.
That
Yeah, I
what
love
can
it.
I recommend on this sense? Have you watched RRR, that Indian movie?
Oh, that's been
No.
on my it's been on my list for so long, but it's like, isn't it 3 hours long or something? That has
Yes.
always
Yeah.
been the thing that stops me, is I'm like, I don't have 3 hours right now.
Same.
But you're playing like 100 hours RPGs, like you can.
Yeah, if I do that in installments.
But
The
really,
thing is that you find an RPG without much story that you can just play and level up characters, and then you watch a lot of shows.
Okay,
I
so I need
see.
to watch RR is what you're saying?
It's absolutely amazing. Like I already like this director. He did Bahubali, which is also like people used to joke that it's like the Dynasty Warriors movie that we really wanted, because
Oh yeah, my
it's
attention
like,
now.
no, really, because they
Yep.
do like crazy things, like one warrior taking on like 300 people with like one swing of the sword, and it looks amazing. Like for me, it's like, uh, let's say when you start to seeing like superhero movies, and after a while, after all the Marvel movies, they don't look like superheroes anymore.
No.
You know what they're going to do. It's nothing
Yeah.
like Thor doesn't do anything surprising.
Mm-hmm.
Then you watch like RRR or Bahubali, and it's like, these guys are superhero. Like these guys are like amazing. It's like some of the best action scenes I ever seen since like The Matrix. Is that kind of thing. Like this is amazing. I want more of this. It's so cool, and it's so like that manly tier kind of cool that you're like, oh my god, this
Yes.
is it. It's almost like they made JoJo into a live action movie
Okay,
or
now I'm
something.
sold.
Like that.
I'm sold. Okay. I've got
But and
time today.
like everything about it is fun, like the music, and then they stop and dance. And I think this movie should win a lot of awards. The only one that is going for the Oscars is the dancing scene, because they have a dance. Like even if you don't want to watch the movie, at least go on YouTube and put the dancing wedding scene,
Is
because it's like amazing.
I think I've seen that one where they're doing the dance off and it gets down to the last two guys at the end. Like
Yeah,
everyone.
yes.
Okay, I've seen that scene, and that was what put me onto the movie in the first place. Was I was like, oh, this seems really fun and really good. And I think I had an impression that it was like, oh brother, where art thou, or something like that. But
No,
it's
no,
also it's like an action movie. There's like action going on.
no, it's extremely. It's like those two guys, let's say, it's almost like they are guerrilla fighters going against the British colonizers.
Okay.
And the whole rest of the movie is them like fighting and escaping from prison and like hunting the British. It's absolutely like amazing action scenes. But because it's like an Indian movie, like they have this thing of also the dancing and the songs. And sometimes like it really ties really well, the songs and the actions and everything is like really good, really different kind of cinema that, let's say, uh, Western action movies do, but it is so satisfying. It's such a good movie.
All
My
right.
dad used to watch a lot of Indian movies when I was younger. Like he just said they're fun.
Well, it's on my list now.
And with that, that is the end of the Axe of the Blood God post show. Thank you so much for listening us and joining us to hang out and talk about RPGs for the last couple hours. Thank you so much for being up at an ungodly hour in Japan.
Go to sleep, dude.
Felipe, appreciate
Yeah,
it.
it's Sunday, whatever.
It's whatever. And yeah, and thank you so much to all of our generous supporters. You are the ones who keep the lights on. And if you aren't supporting Axe of the Blood God, well, we got an amazing community, and for just $1, you can join us on Discord, patreon.com/bloodgodpod. And that promo code is live now, BloodGod400, and you can go get the item of your choice for a 10% discount over on the store. But we'll be back next week. We've got a lot to talk about. I think we might be doing the Trails to Azure review episode next week. But in the meantime, for Eric, Nadia, Felipe, and myself, thanks for listening. Happy adventuring.
Bye.
Bye bye.
And stream is going down.